meeting. Welcome. We've got a really full agenda today, so we're going to jump right in. A few procedural things that I did want to just mention right out front. To get on the speakers list, just raise your hand and we'll take note of that there. The buttons unfortunately don't communicate to myself, and we are going to try and limit each individual speakers to 5 minutes with their speaking, and I will at times be a little bit liberal with that, but if necessary. But I think if we could all try and respect that rule, that will make the meeting function a lot better. So with that, I want to start with just an adoption of the agenda. It's been moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the first item on the agenda is the oath of office. Most of us received the oath of office during our last meeting, but we have one member that still needs to do that, our director from electoral area, and I'm going to have Mike Buda.
Sure, thank you. So as you recall, at the last meeting, almost all of you actually took your oath of office, with two exceptions: Mayor Gary Ander of Bowen Island, who was absent at that meeting, and Justin LeBlanc, Director of Electoral Area A, who had not yet taken office at the time. Since then, just to confirm with you, Mayor Ander actually has taken his oath, leaving us with Director LeBlanc. So that's what we're doing here today. So, Director, are you ready to take your oath?
I think I've already signed.
Oh, great. We've pre-signed. Okay, well, perfect then. So then we can welcome officially to this table, and that means that all members of the Mayor's Council have been sworn in, and we're ready to go.
Okay, well, welcome Director LeBlanc to the club. We'll teach you the secret handshake after the meeting. Yeah. So, okay. So next on the agenda is just approval of the minutes of our last meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And now we're going to move to public delegates. I believe we have 9 public delegates today.
Yes.
Where's the list? Okay, so I'm going to invite the public delegates up. Each public delegate has 5 minutes to present to the Mayor's Council. A lot of the items being discussed are going to be considered later after the agenda, so there won't be any direct questions from the Council, but I would like to invite everyone up. And our first speaker is Dr. Anush Kamanish. Please join us. And just press the button on the microphone just to make sure it's on.
Good morning, honorable mayors and ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to...
So maybe I'll just get you to speak more into the mic. I want to make sure everyone can hear you.
Sure.
Yeah, welcome.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning again, and it's an honor to be here. I've been given 5 minutes time to present other alternative and solutions that for some reason may have not been approached for the transportation system. I think that you all have copies of the system, thanks to Mr. Buda. On the first page, basically it explains what is Sky Bus. And this is basically evolution of the gondolas and other systems that they call it aerial transits, and they are above the ground, and so they remove basically the buses or a variety of things out of the street up, and they are they have worked on it, and at this moment they are far more economical than any alternative that we have. They are cheaper than buses, let alone they are 1/3 of the price of a Skytrain. They are about 30% less than LRT, and for some reason this has not been coming to the attention at this moment. In many major cities they are putting these things up, and they have been proven from 1901, the first one of them in Germany started, and still it's in operation. However, car industries and then buses and then variety of other things and the traffic jams push everything down the ground rather than above the ground. Now, this is in short, and I have only 5 minutes, and jokingly, but with all due respect, I thought that for me, in order to be able to cover something like this, I asked for a solution, and this morning I came up with this. So I'm going to put this on my head to be able, basically, in 5 minutes, be able to transmit what I want to say. So technically, if you look at the pictures there, these are technically the buses that are going on a rail, that the rail is suspended. So it's different than the cableways that goes up and down like that. So their speed is limited to 40 kilometers. These rails, hanging rails, basically you can go about 120 kilometers. And due to the cost and speed of building of this, in 5 years, we can cover Mission to West Vancouver with this, 5 years. It's about 3 times faster than a Skytrain to install and 3 times cheaper. I just wanted that you please search also internet, and also we have a web page and other facilities that you may look at it in these 5 minutes, and all due respects in the morning. I don't want to take any minutes of additional time, but these are available, and it's just please paying attention to that. Most important things that has been unfortunately ignored a little bit, and that's to the blessing of the God, to Vancouver, is we are in earthquake zone. Earthquake zone, and we are in Juan de Fuca. We are 50 kilometers from there. Juan de Fuca, every 300 years will have an earthquake, and it's 14 years delayed already. But unfortunately, we were not as lucky as California, Los Angeles, and San Francisco to have trembles, so it reminds us. As a result, we ended up having 60-story, 80-story concrete building in this city, which is totally no-no. And also, we are having Skytrain, which is not only on concrete buildings, which is not earthquake-proof, but unfortunately, they are putting 4 or 5 of each one 40-ton equipments on the top next to each other to make sure that something bad happens. And this is not my opinion. Any seismologist really can tell that. But somehow there is these meetings are here happening, and scientists are there thinking that, well, they don't listen to us. And it has been a problem. And today, probably thanks to this, I had this opportunity, and I don't know whether I passed my 5 minutes or not. There is no hours here to teach me, but I'm available, and the website is available, and the information is available, and we are going to send a video that explains these things. I didn't have also the chance today to present the video and save myself this emotional stress. However, there are videos and everything that we are going to email to each one of you individually, that at your leisure, whenever you have time, you read that. Am I on time, Mr. Buddha?
You've got 35 seconds left, so the perfect timing. So.
It was my thanks just to be here and this opportunity, and pleasure to be here. I wish somebody had taken pictures of us together, and that's it, 35
okay.
seconds.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. One of the big projects the Mayor's Council is going to be working on is our long-term regional transportation strategy, and a big part of that is starting to look at different emerging technology when it comes to transportation. So appreciate your time.
By all means, thank you very much. They're parked down.
Our next speaker is Deepak Sharma.
Good morning, Mayors. In respect to your time, I've prepared a statement and may look down to read it just to make sure I get all my points across in the valuable 5 minutes I have today. My name is Deepak Sharma. I'm a former student at SFU, and more importantly, I'm a proud resident of Surrey. And for the past 13 years, I've excitedly watched my city grow from being a suburban city to becoming an urban city. I've been lucky enough to be an engaged member of the community and take note on how my city is starting to become the second economic hub of the Metro Vancouver region. Just over a month ago, prior to be electing, our now Honourable Mayor had himself mentioned how our city is the largest in the region when it comes to land size and will soon outgrow the population of Vancouver. As you're all informed individuals, I'm sure you won't disagree with our mayor on that fact. However, knowing this, a few questions I'd like to propose to you all is, Why would the region consider a rapid transit plan that neglects creating a local rail network for Surrey, which would in turn help reduce through traffic in cities such as Burnaby, New West, Richmond, and Vancouver, as jobs in the long run will be staying in Surrey? Why would the region rather shift focus on getting people into downtown Vancouver as fast as possible, which may address present-day ridership needs, however does absolutely nothing for future riders south of the Fraser that will need to get from one dense city center to another dense city center within Surrey itself? It should be noted, I am someone that has been using Skytrain since the age of 13 and still do so till today. Hence, I understand how easily it is to be attracted to Skytrain. However, if I take a step back from the wow factor and appeal of getting a Skytrain extension for Surrey, I'm easily reminded of hey, how Skytrain's great. However, in the city the size of Surrey, the toughest, most time-consuming, and quite frankly, the most painful part of one's daily journey is actually getting to the Skytrain station itself. Hence why it further confuses me that in present day we have a proposed Skytrain extension for the City of Surrey that will mean less stations than the currently funded LRT project, and most importantly, because it's almost triple the cost, in the long run it will cover less land in a city that, as mentioned before, is the largest in the region in land size and will have a population that will outgrow Vancouver someday. Further, I'm aware there is a suggestion that floating around that wherever LRT was proposed, it can be easily replaced by so-called rapid bus transit. I'm assuming if it was that easy, enhancement south of the Fraser would have come over a decade ago. However, based off what was shared by TransLink and other City of Surrey engineers at multiple public consultations, the truth of the matter is that rapid bus transit has a limited capacity, which the funded LRT project surpasses quite significantly. Another point of relevance to be noted is the funded LRT project would be serving the most dense city centers, which are Guildford Town Centre, City Centre, and Newton Town Centre, which this Skytrain extension shamefully overlooks. The Skytrain extension itself will only go up to Fleetwood in phase 1, which is quite alarming as well, but I'll let you, the elected official, discuss why the merits of that make sense, as contrary to popular belief, that is definitely not what the people of Surrey voted for. Lastly, it's important to note that I hope your decision will not be based off some of the following misconceptions of the funded Surrey LRT project. Misconception 1, such as YouTube videos that compare the funded Surrey LRT project to dangerous forms of LRT such as the Sea Line in Calgary, which was built decades ago on a former freight train line. Or the misunderstanding where people are led to believe that light rails in Surrey will be sharing the same lane as regular vehicle traffic. However, the LRT project funded in Surrey will have its own dedicated lane that will be curbed off the ground. Another common misperception is that Surrey LRT will be stuck at red lights when in reality the city has confirmed that the currently funded LRT project would have its own priority lighting. The list of misconceptions goes on. However, in respect to your time, the questions I've asked and points I've brought up are just some of the reasons why I urge the region's mayors to help in bringing common sense back to the City of Surrey, where vital regional transportation decisions are not simply based off weighted votes, populism, and vague campaign promises. Once again, thank you for your valuable time in allowing me to represent a community that looks forward to the currently funded LRT project, and most importantly, represent a community that is excited for the future of Surrey as a second economic hub in the region that continues to strive in being a leader of global innovation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments.
Appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Philip Aguirre.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Philip Aguirre. For the past 45 years, my family has owned a small independent business, the Old Surrey Restaurant. 2019 will be the 12th year of ownership for myself, and for the past 3 years, we've been one of the top 100 restaurants in Canada, according to OpenTable. I grew up swimming at the Newton Wave Pool, built in 1982, and power skating at the Newton Arena on the crossroads of 72nd and King George Boulevard. In 1994, Skytrain came to Surrey and put the community of Newton into a holding pattern of speculation with decades of vacant lots, underdeveloped properties, due to the promise that Newton would be the next for rapid transit 24 years ago. In December of 2013, Julie Pascal, a hockey mom, was murdered at the local arena. The following year, 17-year-old Serena Vermeesh was also found dead in the community. Negative news stories have dominated the headlines. In 2017, the homeless population ballooned to 119. To make things worse, recent gang violence has erupted on the streets with 60 shootings per year and multiple casualties. This has led to a negative brand for the community of Newton, with rampant stories of residents avoiding the area. In 2014, I became the executive director of the newly created Newton BIA, Business Improvement Association. The Newton BIA was created in response to the negative safety concerns about the community. We started with 4 pillars of more events, improved beautification, a safer environment, and government lobbying for infrastructure. For the past 5 years, we have created 40 new programs and hosted 141 events. In 2015, we unveiled an ambitious 20-year plan to create a cultural entertainment district. We have even hosted the State of Newton with the past mayor as our keynote, along with the Minister of Labour, local MLA Harry Baines. All of these initiatives are focused on building community. In the fall of this year, because of my team's effort, I was voted Business Person of the Year by the Surrey Board of Trade. 149,000 people live in the community, making it the 5th largest community in BC, larger than all of Langley. 33% of all business in Surrey is located in Newton, along King George Boulevard. Kwantlen University, the Bell Performing Arts Centre, and a newly renovated community centre are backbones of the area. Newton also showcases multiculturalism and is the gateway community for new immigrants, highlighted by the largest Vaisakhi celebration outside of India, with over 500,000 people attending. The future is bright with an ever-growing youth population. I also wanted to take 1 minute to share some highlights of the community of Guildford, which has a population of 61,000 people. A quick Google search told me that Guildford is the home of the 14th largest mall in Canada, or the 3rd largest in BC, servicing 14.5 million annual visitors. In 2015, the Guildford Rec Centre and Pool was built for a $40 million price tag. And finally, Guildford is home to the Sheraton and 4 other major hotels, providing most of the available beds in the City of Surrey. LRT was going to be the catalyst for revitalization and transform Newton and Guildford. In my opinion, with the decision to stop all work on the LRT line, the community of Newton has been abandoned again. The business case and land use plan were going to shape the future growth of the community. Redevelopment, increased density, and a vibrant, connected, livable community have now all been delayed another 20 years. Consultation has been mentioned as a key component, but neither the mayor or any councillor has made it a priority to discuss these issues with the Newton BIA. Economic growth and jobs in the area could stagnate for the immediate future. The vision of creating a cultural entertainment district without rapid transit seems unlikely. What are the thoughts of local MLA Harry Baines, Ginny Sims, and MP Suk Dhaliwal? Is the provincial and federal government satisfied that Newton and Guildford will have to wait for another 20 plus years? Refreshed plans for how the community is going to be revitalized have been piling up over the past 30 years. It's disappointing that Newton will have to start all over again. The 96 B-Line operating between Newton and Guildford is one of the most successful B-Lines in the region, and therefore a precursor of a rapid transit line in Surrey. The plan to spruce up the 96 B-Line is simply...
So we have gotten to the end of the 5 minutes if you just want to have a concluding remark.
We've been working on this plan for 10 years. It's really unacceptable that we can change on a simple election. If not, then the Mayor's Council needs to show leadership as a regional body. The communities of Newton and Guildford must be a priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Roderick Lewis. I do have a clock here for myself, but if that helps you, no problem. Get yourself organized and settled.
You guys should get a clock for the front of the room.
Okay, we'll see if we can get that in the Mayor's Council budget for 2019.
Maybe your talented and esteemed executive director could buy one. Hello, I'm Roderick Lewis. I lived in White Rock for about 20 years, and I'm a regular public transit user. I'm here today to speak to mainly to the two looming mega projects that will cost potentially maybe as much as $11 billion between them. I'm speaking of the Broadway subway project and the South of Fraser Highway Skytrain line. Main objective of my submissions is to make sure that you are aware that there has been an incomplete evaluation of project alternatives for both of these mega projects, and there's been an incomplete evaluation of potential funding models. For the Broadway subway project, what I say should have been done is an evaluation as part of the technology alternatives of having a Canada Line type line built. Instead of having an extension to the Millennium Line, have a Canada Line type entirely separate line along Broadway and potentially do the line as a public-private partnership. The advantages of doing this would allow for competition between Bombardier, which effectively has a lock-on, a monopoly of the rapid transit lines and the rest of the system, except for the Canada Line, which is largely Hyundai technology. The same for the Fraser Highway line. Rather than just assuming it should be an extension of the existing Expo line, there should be an evaluation by staff, I say, and I say that you mayors should direct your staff to provide you with information of the potential advantages of having the Fraser Highway line built as let's call it a Canada Line 2, which would use trains that operate with regular electric motors, which are, of course, different from the ones that Bombardier uses on the Expo line and the Millennium Line. The Canada Line uses trains that do not use linear induction motors, which is what Bombardier's trains have. The Canada Line trains are built by Hyundai, regular electric motors. So the advantages, again, of having competition thrown into the mix, potentially by having these two projects, public-private partnerships, should have been evaluated, and there should be an opportunity for competing versions of these lines. Have a Canada Line 2, let's call it, along Broadway, and a Canada Line 3 along the Fraser Highway. Additionally, in response partially to the previous speaker, I say it's incumbent upon you all to ensure that South of the Fraser gets a network of rapid transit lines, Skytrain lines, not a network of streetcar lines, which are from 1912. 21st century demands 21st century technologies, such as the automated, computer-driven, separated from roadway lines that the north of the Fraser has benefited from for decades. The mayor of Burnaby, and probably many of you will know that the city of Burnaby has generated $1 billion in reserve funds, making it unique in the region, benefiting from a network of rapid transit lines, legitimate Skytrain lines that network the city. Whether it's New Westminster, Mayor Stewart's Coquitlam, the city of Vancouver, all of the cities north of the Fraser have been able to designate what I like to call economic intensification hubs, town centers, where they've ensured that high rises and densification can occur. Burnaby's have occurred in Lougheed, Edmonds, Brentwood, and Metrotown. Surrey should be able to do the same thing. Rather than building just one line along the Fraser Highway, take advantage of the upcoming federal election and see if the feds want to get name branded for building a, let's call it Canada Line 2, not only along the Fraser Highway, but along where the initial LRT line was intended to travel along King George Highway along to Guildford. Have them both built at the same time. The obligations upon you all, I say, as custodians of the public purse, is to ensure that there have been proper evaluations of funding alternatives. Public-private partnerships have not been evaluated. Additionally, the public hasn't been consulted whether they would like to have an above-ground line run along Broadway to UBC. The 8-mile distance could be constructed for about $3 billion, according to TransLink's own figures, which put $3 billion at the cost of the 10-mile line from King George Station out to Langley City. Before you go ahead with the Broadway subway project, put it on hold and ask the public what they prefer. The business case for the Broadway Subway project says on page 35 that the public was not consulted about an elevated line.
So Roderick, we have hit the 5 minutes. If you just want to make a concluding remark.
My concluding remarks are to Mayor Stewart, the more important, and Mayor Stewart, the less important. The more important was born on November the 8th, so that makes him more important. My birthday. My concluding remarks are that please ensure that there's been a complete evaluation of project alternatives and funding alternatives for these two mega projects. Could be $11 billion the way it's currently planned. Instead, spend half that on a PPP, Canada Line 2, Canada Line 3 type project, and build a Broadway subject, allow the public to say what they would like, having the Broadway line go all the way from UBC to Commercial and Broadway above ground.
Okay, so we have hit our time limit. So thank you very much, Roderick. Really appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Yes. One note for delegations and all comments. I do want to make sure that everyone is respectful to everyone around the table. I think
my comments were intended to be respectful, tongue-in-cheek. I have no disrespect for Mayor Stewart from Coquitlam.
And we love all our Mayor Stewarts equally around this table. So thank you, Roderick. Our next speaker is Mike Saron.
Good morning, mayors, all of you equally, chief and others. Thank you to the Kaikai First Nation for accommodating us here on their land today. All Coast Salish peoples, I'm extremely grateful. I'm also very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you. Congratulations on your victories this fall, and thank you for stepping up into public service. My name is Mike Sauron. I'm a resident of Vancouver, a transit user, and I've invited other people to follow along here today and join us online through my work with Abundant Transit. It's a new not-for-profit that started this year to advocate for more transit for more people across BC. And that's why I'm here. We need more transit for more people, built urgently without delay. I know you know that. It's part of why you're here. And I know that most people are here to advocate for a particular technology or a particular route. I'm not here to do that. I cannot speak as a Surreyite, but I can speak as a British Columbian and a human being. And so whichever options you choose, whichever way we go forward in the regional transportation plan and beyond, move quickly and get ready to do more, a lot more. It is time to significantly increase our ambition and urgency as we update the regional transportation strategy in 2019. What we understand about 2045 has changed a lot since the plan was first drafted. The recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report was widely misreported and misunderstood. Yes, we are about to blow through our 1.5 degree warming targets, and the consequences are far from good. The report concluded that we needed a World War II style effort. It is not that we have 10 years to implement that effort. It is to avert disaster, as many reported. It is that our carbon budget only has 10 years left in it, we hope. So, if we haven't fulfilled our commitments in 10 years or fewer, human civilization as we know it may not survive. That is really, really heavy. So let's look straight at this reality. I do not see a World War II style mobilization. Look at what is happening right now with the Surrey Rapid Transit Project, now delayed. We do not have 10 years to act. We have 0 years left to act, as Michael Mann says. Everything has to happen now, everything. So I'm truly, truly grateful that the BC government has launched the Clean BC plan and is readying more action, especially on transit. I'm grateful that the body is attentive to GHG emissions with your low-carbon fleet strategy. You're paying attention to the climate crisis. I understand you have a renewable energy goal, clear and ambitious GHG targets for 2050. None of it is enough. Your plan is already out of date. The latest report and news from the talks right now in Poland are extremely discouraging. We are already behind. Canada and nearly everyone is failing to meet our commitments. The national conversation is dominated by discussion about government support for car manufacturers and the fossil fuel industry. It is frankly appalling. So I'm here to say, personally, I'm genuinely distressed. But I have hope. So I'm here because of this political moment that we were in. We have a new mayor's council, an upcoming federal election, a provincial Clean BC plan that specifically mentions opportunities for public transit in the next 18 to 24 months, and a terrifying scientific and economic consensus on the need to act. So this is our moment. We are turning away from fossil fuels to wind, tidal, hydro, efficiency, much more. $26 trillion in global action, and so we need to act. So I'm just going to conclude by saying the province is already suggesting it's going to be up to us. Millions of megatons of LNG projects are planned, and it's up to cities and municipalities to bear that burden. So we have a lot of work to do, Abundant Transit is excited about this work. We're excited about the regional transit strategy, the regional transportation strategy, and we're going to be here to take part of it. So I want to thank you all for your work on this, encourage you to be much more ambitious, and say that the people in your municipalities and across British Columbia have your back. So let's get to work.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mike. Our next speaker is Malcolm Johnson.
Oops. Played rugby till I was 57. My knees are shot. Good morning. So Surrey wants the dated Skytrain system. Pity the taxpayer. There are many technical and capacity problems with extending the Expo line. It is too expensive for what it does, and Surrey can have a more affordable light rail network to serve the city, and the whole Eastern Valley can have a fast tram train service terminating in Vancouver that operates on the old BCE line. Rapid transit alone does not reduce congestion. A major misconception, as rapid transit uses a term as a catch-all for all transit modes. If the regional mayors want to cope with increasing congestion and rapidly increasing number of vehicle accidents happening now in Metro Vancouver, they had better plan for light rail, because modern LRT has the proven record in alleviating traffic congestion and its associated ills. With nearly 600 light rail systems in operation today, with over 200 built since 1978. Modern light rail has become the backbone of urban transit in cities around the world. Metro Vancouver does not build with light rail, rather it builds with a dated light metro, which we call Skytrain. TransLink operates two non-compatible railways under the Skytrain banner, the Canada Line and the Expo Millennium Lines. The Expo and M lines are proprietary railway technology which Bombardier owns, the vehicle technology, and SNC-Lavalin owns most of the system's engineering patents. What we call Skytrain today is now called Movia Metro, and it's the sixth name of the proprietary railway that has been called in 40 years. Bombardier has now folded Skytrain within its Movia Metro subway line product. That Bombardier has taken all of the component features of Skytrain and simply added or hidden the product amongst its better-selling Movia line of Metro products is a clue that Bombardier's true feelings about Skytrain. Powered by linear induction motors that come from a discarded maglev technology, what we call Skytrain was first named Intermediate Capacity Transit System. Studies in Ontario found that ICTS lacked the capacity and cost up to 10 times more to build than light rail. ICTS proved to be the Canadian version of the Edsel, far too expensive for the job it was to do. Renamed Advanced Light Rail Transit to compete with LRT, the name change fooled no one except in people in BC, and it still does. After 40 years, there's been little interest in limb-powered Movia Metro, and the mode is teetering on abandonment. Only 7 Skytrain-type systems have been built, and this will soon decrease to 6 as the TTC is going to tear theirs down. No new Skytrain systems have been ordered in the past decade, and except for Vancouver, no one wants the thing. Kuala Lumpur, the only other city to build multiple Skytrain lines, may never build with it again due to Bombardier and SNC-Lavalin being named as part of the corruption trials of Malaysia's former Prime Minister Najib Razak. Why is Vancouver the only city in the world that continues to build with Skytrain? That is an important question. Internationally, Skytrain is unsaleable. It costs a lot more to build than light rail. It costs more to operate than light rail. It costs a lot more to maintain than light rail. It lacks capacity, and when compared to light rail, importantly, it lacks the flexibility of operation. Flexibility of LRT has demonstrated that a simple tram can operate as a streetcar, operate on street in mixed traffic as light rail, operating on a reserved or dedicated right-of-way, on regular railway tracks as a commuter train, tram train, and it can all do this on one route with the one vehicle. Why is LRT considered second-rate by politicians? Has TransLink deliberately designed light rail to be inferior to Skytrain, despite the fact internationally the opposite's true? No one builds with Skytrain. No one is even interested in it. There'll be many more problems with Surrey's flip-flop from LRT to Skytrain. Skytrain's maximum capacity due to regulatory and infrastructure deficiencies is limited to 15,000 persons per hour to direction. And to increase capacity, an additional $2 to $3 billion must be spent upgrading the Expo and M lines. As the Expo line is near capacity, an extension will cause severe overcrowding and burning in Vancouver, as only a limited number of trains can be operated. The cost of building Skytrain to Langley will be at least $1 billion more than the presently funded LRT, and there's no source of additional funding. LIMS do not operate well in the snow, and it snows between eastern Surrey and Langley, trust me. TransLink will be tied to one supplier, Bombardier, and at Bombardier were to cease production of the Innovia ART.
So we've reached the 5 minutes. If I can get you to just make a concluding remark. Thank you.
I'll give you this quote from Gerald Fox at the end. This is when he shredded the Evergreen Line business case. In fact, internationally, the Evergreen Line business game became a joke. I think American transit expert Gerald Fox has it right when he shredded the Evergreen Line's business case, but eventually Vancouver will need to adopt lower-cost LRT in its lesser corridors or else limit the extent of its rail system, and that seems to make some people at TransLink very nervous.
Thank you very much for your comments. Our next speaker is Albert Melinius.
Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to leave hard copies of this with your staff, but I'll also send a larger print version by email. I made it really small print. Okay, my name is Albert Melanius. I have been driving buses for people with disabilities for 43 years. I was driving them before they were called handy darts. I speak as an individual from my own perspective. A change has been proposed to the Surrey Transit Plan. I have two comments. First, if the Skytrain is to be built, the handy dart passengers can only make use of it if there is a method to get them to the station. Otherwise, the distance to the station is one more barrier. I have already made this point when speaking on the Vancouver subway. Second, there seem to be two different impulses at work here, and a choice needs to be made. In one model, transit follows the need as the city expands. In the other model, high-speed transit is built to induce people to live in certain areas. In transit, public money should follow public need, not guide it. Systematic expansion. I am suggesting that the board should develop a step-at-a-time approach to the development of new transit lines and go up in stages rather than going straight to the final high-density version. When new areas are built, transit should normally start with shuttles until they are at capacity at rush hour, and then move to 40-foot conventional buses until they are full, and then move to articulated buses until they are full, and then move to double articulated BRT or rapid transit. And from that, move to light rail, and as a final step to Skytrain or subway. This is an idealized version. Most of the region is somewhere in the middle of the process. Your statistics will tell you where to start with larger capacities. One of the values of a step-at-a-time method is that securing the right-of-way for bus rapid transit would help in securing the right-of-way for the LRT, which would lead naturally to securing the right-of-way for future subway or Skytrain, once need is proven. A possible visual tool. I checked the website. There are plenty of reports and statistics, but I see no chart or map to make it clear which lines are at capacity and need to be expanded. Perhaps I just missed it. If this method or some version of it is already in place, it needs to be emphasized. A chart could be made and regularly updated to show which lines are full at every rush hour, which lines are full less than 5 days a week, and which lines are lightly traveled every day of the week. The chart should be color-coded as well as having the numbers so that people who cannot visualize statistics, most of us, will know what is meant when the planners read the reports. It should be near the front page and easy to find. I believe that transit should follow population growth, not precede it and attempt to channel it. A less traveled route probably needs modification, like more bus shelters or accessible stops. Both of these things are important to my passengers, the handy-dart people. As a final comment, it's political. If the original plan had said Skytrain, I would be here arguing to continue with Skytrain. But my question is this: if you're going to review this, how many parts of the plan will you review? And that question leads me to, do you actually have a plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Our next speaker is Sangha Sequinder.
Good morning. My name is Sukhwinder Sangha, and I am a lifelong resident of the Lower Mainland with ties both to the City of Vancouver and the City of Surrey. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak before you. It's one of the first public speaking in this kind of forum for me, so I'm a little nervous. Please forgive me. I'm here before you today on behalf of many friends, neighbors, and family members, and other concerned citizens of Surrey who are worried about the changes to the South of Fraser Area Transit Plan. I am, of course, talking about the rapid transit projects. Having grown up in the City of Surrey, I want to express my sincere objection to the recently proposed halting of the LRT plan in favor of taking the Skytrain to Langley. My fellow Surrey property taxpayers are also wondering why the rush to Langley. Why are the communities of Guildford and Newton and other North Surrey communities being abandoned? Why are previous studies and analyses being thrown out? These questions remain unanswered, even though decisions are swiftly being taken without new public input. Why does all the previous consultation, planning, and cost lead us? The pressing question here is, what is the point of investing in a 10-year plan only to change it in the 11th hour? There is yet to be a satisfying answer to any of these questions. One of the answers provided to Surrey residents is the leadership change in Surrey. I am a well-wisher, and we are excited to have a new leadership in Surrey. The new mayor's success is indeed the success for our city. However, if we talk about politics and numbers, a significant number of voters voted for candidates who were either in support of LRT or for at least a review of the process. There was no particular plebiscite on to which technology or route was favored by Surrey residents. To say otherwise is just false. Surrey voters surely did not vote to alienate Guildford and Newton and other Surrey communities by placing them on the back burner. These communities have been working hard with TransLink for years and deserve the resources that were promised to them. The routes for the LRT are a benefit for these communities. Why are we asking them to wait? Along the routes in North Surrey, the buses are already full. The ridership is there now and can be scaled up with rapid transit such as LRT down 104 Avenue and along King George to Newton. I would like to understand, why is it okay to service Guildford and Newton and other parts with buses, while Skytrain is the appropriate solution for reaching Langley? We have not seen the rationale or justification for this. Previous studies have shown the opposite, that rapid bus service such as the B-Line services could better service the route along Fraser Highway, and LRT-like infrastructure for Guildford and Newton would be best there. The connection of our existing vibrant communities of Guildford and Newton to Surrey Centre with rapid transit infrastructure is a once-in-a-generation opportunity that should not be set aside. To speak frankly, the work has been done, the money is there, the population base is there, and the ridership is there too. I encourage you to get the work done. The analysis of TransLink alone shows that the population around the LRT line along King George and 104 Avenue vastly outweighs the population bases around Fraser Highway's new route proposal. I am no expert, but I feel that transit should be in the places where the communities are and where the communities can grow the most. Delay in the Surrey project would most likely mean delay in other regional transit projects, and that helps no one. There also is much uncertainty, and unknown costs are yet to be known. TransLink is about moving people. Let's get the residents of South Fraser in Surrey moving with the best transit plan. Please vote for a vision that would make city, your fellow city, a world-class connected livable city. I urge you all to vote against the proposal to take Skytrain to Langley at this time and reinvigorate your support for connections between Newton, Guildford, to Surrey Central with rapid transit infrastructure. Skytrain down Fraser Highway can be and should be included as an option in future planning in Phase 2 of the regional plan, just not now. You are all leaders in your communities who are striving to better your cities, all the while being a collective force for making this a stronger, better region. Your leadership is needed today here as well so that the right choice can be made for the residents and citizens of South of the Fraser.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. 5 minutes on the dot, so very impressed. Thank
Practice.
you. And our final speaker this morning is Lee Lockwood.
Good morning. Members of the TransLink Mayors Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the decision that's being considered. That is changing the route and technology in Surrey from LRT to Skytrain. The ad hoc group of residents that we represent from Surrey through Abbotsford very strongly rejects the Skytrain option. Why? Contrary to stated reasons for Skytrain, Skytrain does nothing for our region whatsoever. It is fiscally irresponsible. You are stuck with a sole source fiscally challenged supplier, and it does nothing to enhance the South of Fraser economy. It does not serve or come close to servicing a wide enough current, let alone future population. Even worse, the technology is not seismically survivable. The light rail option utilizing the 104th Street corridor to city center, intersecting with the King George Boulevard down to a terminus in Newton, which intersects with the interurban corridor and a large piece of property owned by TransLink, is far and away a better solution for our region. The region we speak of, it consists of North Delta, Surrey, South Surrey, Sullivan, Cloverdale, Langley City, Langley Township, Fort Langley, Aldergrove, Abbotsford, Sumas, Yarrow, Sardis, and Chilliwack. 99 kilometers of the BC interurban right-of-way at a fraction of the cost of what you are being asked to consider. This line services 16 communities, 14 post-secondary institutions, Abbotsford Airport, multiple industrial parks and tourism at no cost for passenger use. With a state-of-the-art proven hydrogen technology that has been used in Germany for 2 years, this region will be making a significant statement in terms of greenhouse gas reductions. In 2009, I was appointed a member of the South of the Fraser Community Rail Task Force. We had elected members from the councils of Delta, Surrey, White Rock, Langley City, Township of Langley, Abbotsford, Kwantlen University, University of the Fraser Valley, Trinity Western University, plus 2 community representatives. This task force, through the Shaw Television, created a 27-minute documentary video. I believe the link to that video was given to you through separate written submissions. For those of you that may not be aware, our task force met with former CEO of TransLink, Tom Prendergast, and his management team on 3 separate occasions in the Township of Langley boardroom and presented our plan and idea that have been worked on for a couple of decades. Coupled with the facts presented were the important facts uncovered in 2009. Specifically, the interurban corridor was not sold in 1988. Only BC Hydro's freight division was sold. The corridor is owned by the people of BC for passenger use. No-cost passenger rights were preserved and renewed in June of 2009, thanks to the support of all municipal councils south of the Fraser. Double tracking, if required in the Pratt-Livingston corridor, shall be done at CP Rail's expense, including any and all additional expenses related to the same. There are many more items within that master agreement between CP Rail and BC Hydro that would be in support of our proposal. Tom Prendergast and his team were so taken by this opportunity, they wanted to initiate a 1-year demonstration line. Unfortunately, a few months later, he was hired to be CEO of the world's largest transportation system, the New York Transit System. What is our ask? Our ask, in short, we would appreciate a Mayor's TransLink Council support for establishing a provincially endorsed TransLink and BC Transit-led South of the Fraser Community Rail Task Force. This could be established in short order, last about 6 months, and would measure the facts regarding support of same within the communities. We would appreciate an opportunity to present the full scope of our plan to the Mayor's TransLink Council going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comments, and I do want to thank all of the delegates this morning for your thoughtful presentations. I remark one of the remarks from the delegates indicated that the decisions we're making are not simple or easy, and I couldn't agree more with those comments. So, moving along with the agenda, we're now on item 3.1, which is our 2019 work plan. This item was briefed with the Mayor's Council at our last meeting. We took the feedback we received around the table and are here to present the work plan for 2019. And I'm now going to pass it on to Mike Buda to do a short presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this is a follow-up to a discussion from the last meeting. We took all of your comments as well as input from TransLink staff and board to develop this final work plan. As we discussed last time, as I discussed last time, and we're in the midst of a very important pivot point here in the region. We have our existing 10-year vision 3/4 of the way complete. We've secured $5 billion in senior government funding towards the $10 billion in new services that we've already approved. We have a post-vision process about the launch with the RTS update. This is all happening while ridership is exploding in a way that's absolutely unique in this region, in North America. And we have a federal government heading into an election next year. And I think most importantly and most excitingly, we have a new group of community leaders in this table with fresh ideas and energy. For me, that means there's a lot of opportunity. So the work plan is designed to capitalize on this opportunity. So you'll see there in the report on the screen there, the major work plan elements that we discussed last time. They remain mostly unchanged. Some of the details, we've certainly reflected the comments that we heard. The federal election is the first one there, mostly because there's an urgency issue to start getting ready. The key is that that's an opportunity for us to start laying the groundwork for completing the 10-year vision, which includes all the projects in the 10-year or in the Phase 3 plan, as well as rail to UBC. And then importantly, that funding is going to help us sort of start seeding the post-vision projects that we'll start identifying in the RTS. You'll see later on discussion about how options for how to employ this strategy that are perhaps more ambitious and more complex than most regional governments would undertake. I think this kind of work, this deliberate, intensive work is important because we're competing with other major cities in Canada, particularly Toronto and Montreal, both of whom are a short train ride away from Ottawa. They have over 50 MPs. Fair or not, we as a region have to work harder at getting the attention of all parties in Ottawa, of the establishment in Ottawa, so they understand what our needs are and how important it is that they're partners. So there's a big work plan element, readying ourselves for the federal election strategy. The work on the regional transportation strategy and the Phase 3 plan are important for us so we know where we're going in the future in terms of expanding and improving our transit and transportation network. So there's a lot of work in both. Of course, those will both feed into our work around the election strategy. And in fact, there's a lot of synergy between the two. As part of our election strategy, we'll be getting out and talking a lot about how important transit is, what role it plays in our region. That's actually going to be the same kind of conversation we'll be doing through the RTS and advancing the remaining projects in the vision. So there's a lot of, and then of course having those conversations will feed into a regional discussion and debate during the election period. So there's a lot of synergy between those two. Provincial engagement is there because the province is always our primary and first partner, and it's always important for this body, I believe, in TransLink, to focus on improving that partnership, which is incredibly strong right now, but there's always opportunities and a need to continue to deepen those. We've talked a little bit about how they'll play an important role in the RTS and, of course, funding future phases of the vision, completing the vision. There's an element there around governance, mostly around getting some of the small details right in our legislation and how we work with the board and with staff. I think the last thing I'd want to leave on this report before turning it back to the chair is that I think we heard very clearly from the last meeting and in comments since then that everyone wants to get going quickly. There's a lot to do. So you'll see in the work plan and the agenda planning for the coming meetings, indeed we are getting going really quickly. So we have the first meeting in January is going to be looking at getting guidance on technology choice for rail to UBC. Obviously, we'll be continuing to work on the South of Fraser process, and in fact, we'll have the first intensive Mayor's Council workshop on the RTS at that meeting. In February and March, we continue with that kind of work, as well as finalizing our priorities for Green Infrastructure Fund funding from the federal government. We'll be getting an update on the low-carbon fleet strategy, which the Mayor's Council initiated a couple of years ago. Be looking at Burnaby Mountain, looking at opportunities to use real estate development to fund transit. So there's lots of work coming. TransLink's ready as a partner. We have our own resources, obviously, to bring to bear. One of the recommendations, obviously, is related to making sure that we're resourced properly as a body. I think with that, Mr. Chair, I'll pass it back to you. Happy to answer any questions. There are recommendations in the report there.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation. I'll now open up to questions or comments regarding the work plan. Yep, Mayor Stewart.
Great, thanks very much for the presentation. I think it's a very important idea that you're pursuing there, that we all come together and to approach the federal government to make sure that they're well aware of our needs. I can say that I have been speaking to ministers both formally and informally. There does seem to be enthusiasm for our plan going forward. Most importantly, the one idea that seems to have caught their attention is this idea of Skytrain from Langley to UBC. There is some kind of view that I'm seeing that I'm hearing about this chatter is that they seem excited about this. Somebody can get on the Skytrain in Langley and end up at UBC. And again, I've heard informally from federal ministers that they're interested in pursuing this. So I think your plan is a wise one, and I support it. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? And not seeing any, I'll look for someone to move the recommendation and the three outlined in the report there. It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, our next item is the 2019 committee structure. All the members received some brief outline in terms of the three committees that we're proposing here on the report. I think the one common thing that I heard from all the folks is that we do want to kind of start to get to work early, so we want to get these committees up and going because they're a big component of having the Mayor's Council be able to dig a little bit deeper and ultimately be able to serve this larger body. So I think the report is relatively straightforward, so I will open up to any questions or comments. Mayor Brody.
Right there. Mr. Chair, I've looked through the report and the committee structure, and I think it's a good one. I think we should go forward with it. I just want to make the point, though, that there are, mostly in the planning areas, let me give an example to make my point. If we're talking about the gondola going up Burnaby Mountain, Burnaby needs to be there at the committee meeting. When we talk about the George Massey Tunnel Review, whatever that entails, Richmond needs to be there as well. And those are just two examples. So we have to be alive to the fact, from my point of view, that there can be others who need to be involved in committee discussions and should be alerted at the appropriate time.
No, I think that's a good comment. I think all of our committees, all members are actually welcome to attend and observe any of our committee meetings. But I think some onus should actually be on us to actually alert members when particularly big issues like that are on the agenda that would affect the community. So I think that point is well taken. Any other questions or comments regarding the committee structure? Not seeing any. If I can get someone to move the recommendations in the report. Moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, 3.3 is the 2019 meeting schedule. It's been moved. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so far so good. 4.1, the regional transportation strategy. This is no doubt going to be one of our big items that we're going to be working over the next few years, and I'm going to pass it on to staff to do a short presentation.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. We've got an information report before you, and then a brief presentation Steve and myself will give just to walk you through the highlights. As you're aware, likely, the South Coast BC Transportation Authority Act requires
So maybe just to start, we have a lot of new people around the table. If I can maybe just get both of you to introduce yourselves. Sorry.
Apologies for that. I'm Andrew McCurran, Director of Strategic Planning and Policy. And I'm staying in policy, and Steve are the co-sponsors sort of leading the effort.
We're all going to get to know you very well.
There you go. You'll see us a lot. So our act requires that we update the strategy every 5 years. And you can see the existing strategy was adopted in 2013 and then followed closely by the mayor's 10-year vision, which is a more detailed implementation plan in 2014. And those documents really provide the blueprint for the fully funded investment plans that you can see we've adopted, phase 1 and phase 2 of the 10-year vision, and shortly in the next couple of years, phase 3. And so that's really those plans are quite important to provide the guidance to deliver the projects, the actual action that we see on the ground. Our region has really been shaped heavily by past transportation plans. Since 1975 in particular, we've been working consistently towards this vision of a compact transit-oriented region. And in the mid-90s, I'll draw your attention to that graphic in the bottom right, really the Transport 2021 and the Livable Region Strategic Plan were the plans that were adopted at that point, long-range strategies that still provide the framework today for the investments, the transport investments that we've been making. And with, obviously, the direction, the leadership of the previous Mayor's Council to approve the Phase 2 investment plan, that took us a really quite big step forwards to realizing that 30-year vision. And with the completion of the 10-year vision, we have a Phase 3 still to go, Phase 3 plan in the next couple of years. Once that's complete, we will have built out largely most of the investments in Transport 2021, and many of the policy initiatives will have made some substantial progress. But there's still, remaining challenges. The region is continuing to grow. The road network is still constrained, and so congestion is a growing problem. This is a map of travel time on a typical fall day. You can see there's congestion still throughout the region at many times of day. Transit ridership has been growing at record levels as a response to the major investments that we've been making, but there's still chronic overcrowding on much of the system, largely as a result of that record transit ridership growth. And in many parts of the region, there's inadequate transit service really to provide options. So there's still challenges. And the question before us, I think, really in this process, and the question for yourselves at the Mayor's Council table is what's next? What should we do, collectively as a region, once we're finished with the 10-year vision? So the previous Mayor's Council and the TransLink Board provided some direction already in the last year or so that we should undertake a long-range planning process that's really, provides the space to think big about the future. And in particular, as Steve is going to describe in a few minutes, to undertake a really broad, meaningful engagement process to ensure we've got a good, robust dialogue with people about the future that they want to see. And the three questions we really think are important to answer through this process are described here. This is sort of a first cut. But really, the first one is about vision and values and goals. Sort of what kind of region do we want to be in 30 years? The next one is really, do we have what it takes? Are we fundamentally set up to achieve the goals? And the third one is about what investments we need to make to achieve those goals and how we should pay for them. So we're not starting from scratch. We've already got some good direction from the previous Mayor's Council and the board. This represents this is a graphic from a Mayor's Council workshop asking about the key problems and challenges and opportunities that we should be exploring. But we're at a stage now where staff has done some good work to establish some of the background material, but we're really needing some good, clear direction from policymakers. So we're really looking forward to engaging you, the Mayor's Council, through your committees. The future, long-range planning is always uncertain. We know no one can predict the future, but we think that the future is more uncertain now than it has been in many years. There's a lot of forces here at play. You can see some of them up on the screen. And in particular in the realm of technology. We know that technologies are being adopted faster and faster, and in many makers and regulators to keep pace with those changes. And so and in particular in the realm of new mobility, sort of the area of digital communications, automation, electrification, shared use platforms, artificial intelligence that are really potentially converging to change the transportation system in pretty fundamental ways, potentially over the course of this long-range planning period. So it's an important consideration for yourselves as we engage in this process. So we're thinking we need to change how we plan. Instead of looking at just a single point forecast and assuming we know in 30 years sort of how jobs and population and incomes and travel patterns are going to be distributed, we'll take a more of a scenario planning approach where we're proposing to paint a couple different futures and test the resiliency of our existing plans and our proposed plans against those futures. I want to describe just briefly the timeline for the process, but then highlight the scenarios partnership with Metro Vancouver. So that scenarios work is really going to be background material to feed into the public conversation, which we're proposing to launch in spring of 2019, and then run a process that will last roughly 18 months with the goal of having a final product by mid-2020. But you can see in that first or second box there, the possible futures work. Following some discussion with the Mayor's Council and the TransLink Board and the Metro Vancouver Board last year, we've now got a good established partnership with Metro Vancouver. So we're undertaking that work together with the idea of jointly producing a document that describes sort of plausible futures that the region thinks might materialize and that we need to consider as we jointly undertake our long-range planning exercises. So some of the forces that we're thinking about in this scenarios work and that will come back and engage you in some more detail over the coming months. Just as a little teaser, global economy and trade. So how will changes in the global economy affect us here in Metro Vancouver? Changing nature of work. What if fewer people have stable employment, or more people are engaged in the gig economy, or virtual workers working from remote locations? How will that impact travel patterns? Climate change. How will rising sea levels affect our transportation network? Automated vehicles, advanced technology, artificial intelligence. What if everyone had their own AV, or what if AVs were primarily deployed in shared fleets? All of those things have quite a huge impact actually on the outcomes of the kinds of transportation investments we might want to make. So the idea is to use those scenarios to assess the performance of our current plans, help us think differently about the future, and to make sure that the investments that we're proposing to make and that you're proposing to make in the next long-range strategy are resilient to no matter what future materializes. So I'm going to turn over to Steve now to talk about the engagement process.
Yeah, so we're looking at this as a plan, recognizing that this is something that literally affects every single person in the Metro Vancouver region. When you think about it, young and old, from all walks of life in every corner of this region are affected by this strategy and by this plan ultimately. And so we want to respect that, and we want to have an engagement process that reaches a vast range of people, gets their feedback, gets their input, gets their ideas as much as possible. We're looking at designing an engagement process that's going to be broad, inclusive, transparent, and through that process, we want to create a lot of awareness of what we're doing, so a lot of people are aware of this plan is being done. We want to build interest in it. I mean, a lot of people here find it inherently fascinating. When you get out there, a lot of people do, but we want to keep that momentum going. And we do want to ultimately earn a lot of public support for where we land. And that's pretty important as well. Now, here's an example of the way we're thinking about it. We've got three streams that we're thinking about. You've got your highly engaged stakeholders that are always going to get involved in these processes. We want to include them. We want to get broad representation from across the region. We want to make sure that we're reaching out to suburbs. We want to make sure that we're getting out to First Nation communities. We want to make sure we're getting out to various sectors in the economy in our communities. And we want to bring in new voices as well. It's important that we reach out and get in new voices, multicultural communities, immigrant communities, community groups that we wouldn't typically go to in this process. So it's a big effort that we're undertaking, and we're going to use a range of tools and platforms that we often haven't used before. Again, our effort here is to try to get as many people as deeply involved as possible in this effort. Timelines, we're in a pre-engagement period right now, so we're starting the conversation, we're starting to build awareness of it. In the spring, we're going to start the formal engagement process, going out, encouraging participation, developing that vision, exploring those big ideas, and then towards the fall of 2020, working on that final report. And so just to wrap up, we'll have continued input and direction from a joint committee of this body and the board of TransLink. We'll have a workshop for the Mayor's Council early in the new year. And then finally, we'll begin the kickoff of the formal engagement process in the spring of 2019, around May, but that date may shift a little bit, just depending on some moving pieces on that. So that's where we land, and we're happy to take some questions from you right now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll now open it up to anyone around the table. No doubt this will be an issue. Mayor Walker.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Again, this is all kind of brand new to me, and I find it extremely interesting. My question is around other alternatives, and one of the presentations earlier talked about the interurban, and I think that frankly we need to look at every alternative that is available out there. The interurban may simply be one of a number of lines. Rail lines throughout the Lower Mainland I don't know about, but we could certainly look into. In all likelihood, they're not necessarily something that is under the control of TransLink at this point, but surely we can have a look at who does own them and how we can go about getting an opportunity to use them. It seems to me if something is in place, there's no sense, trying to replicate it. So I think that's one of the important pieces. There are a number of alternatives we can look at. I'm not sure whether we can delve into livable cities now, but the idea of people actually living close to where they work seems to resonate with me. After 4 years of not traveling much around the Lower Mainland, my trip in this morning was amazingly eye-opening. If that's what happens every day as we drive around the Lower Mainland, and I only had to come from White Rock in here, to me it's about a 15 or 20-minute drive normally. And so livability is something that we need to talk about as well. I'm not saying that we can start plucking people out and saying you must work here, but let's try and talk to organizations, companies, and so on, so that people actually have an opportunity as one of the first goes to work in their community. And after that, we will go from there. And the last thing I want to say, and I kind of missed on it, and I apologize, Chair, but I'd like to add it to the pile, and that is we've got one shot at the next federal election. That's one shot every 4 years. And so we better make that shot work, and we better know exactly what we want to do and be able to come together. It is regional, there's no doubt about it, but it's also, smaller areas. That's my own community of White Rock, and, kind of what's in the pie for me. So thank you very much.
No, well, I think those points are well taken. If we don't know what we're asking for, we're not going to end up getting it. So I think this plan is going to not only guide us in the short term, but it's going to guide the region for the long time. And I think in terms of your comments about land use planning, I was really pleased to see in the reports the collaboration with Metro Vancouver, which has a big role in regional land use planning, because I think that's absolutely essential, connecting those two items together. Are there any other comments or questions? Mayor McCallum.
I just would like to say that I certainly support the plan that's before us. I think one of the things I've always thought about in the region and transit is that we also need to look very closely at areas like West Coast Express that we run as a train, basically. And it's been a big success since we have done it, and we have looked at in the past, and we should be looking in the future if we can expand that further out the valley. I think there's a real need, and it's an area that I think that we need to certainly have in our planning document. The other area that I have been working with over the years when I've been on transit is water movement of people. There's many cities around the world that use the water, probably more than we do. We're fortunate that we have such a great harbor, and we have surrounding water. And we've worked hard over the years in transit to create the C-Bus, and with new C-Buses coming on. But also there's an opportunity, I think, to do a smaller level of transit on water between our communities that are on the water. So I think those two areas in particular we should at least not forget about, but to include in any future plans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor McCallum. Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much. We're in the middle of we're getting underway with a new city plan for the City of Vancouver. The staff are coming back in the spring. with recommendations as how do we move forward with that, which is really exciting. But I'm just wondering how, just a bit more detail about your public engagement plans, because that we want to make sure that those two things dovetail. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll work closely with city staff to ensure that we're incorporating views throughout. You know, remembering that we're really trying to push our the people we're engaging with to think very, very long term as well, 30 years. But we think it's essential that we're coordinated with municipalities in their local planning process as well. That's really vital to this whole exercise. And instead of doing it piecemeal, so we'll be in working closely with municipal staffs throughout the region throughout this process.
Okay, well, not seeing any other comments. This was a report for information, and if I can get a motion to receive. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, our final item on our open agenda is the South of the Fraser Rapid Transit Planning. This is a continuation of our discussion at the last meeting, and I'm now going to ask TransLink staff to make a presentation.
Thank you, Chair and Mayors. I'm Jeff Cross, Vice President of Planning and Policy, and with me is Sandy Zane, Vice President of Infrastructure, Management, and Engineering. Got that right? So we're pleased to be here. We've got a number of things that we'd like to accomplish today. Multiple objectives coming out of the last meeting. Clearly, we want to bring forward to you a work plan that hits a couple of different items, both how do we advance the Skytrain project through project development for Fraser Highway, as well as concurrently looking at a refresh to the South of Fraser rapid transit strategy. There are implications for our B-Line planning with a new refresh that we want to go through with you, and we'd like some direction on that. There were requests for continued examination of the expenditures made so far on Surrey-Newton-Guildford and what the implications are for the remaining available funding that we'll give you an update on as well. So Sandy and I will tag team this presentation. I appreciate that we sent out a lot of material last week. We decided that the best format for that was actually a short cover note with a briefing deck that has a lot of text on it. So we'll try, as opposed to reading this out verbatim, just to give you some nuance as to what we see some of the key process steps going forward. So the idea for today is obviously to recap the direction that we received and what the implications of that is from the November meeting, how we've incorporated that into a work plan to accomplish both of those things that I just talked about. Looking at that work plan, what are some of the risks? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the opportunities to do so quickly? I come back with how we're dealing with the expenditures to date. I'll talk about the B-Line, and then one final thing is that we realize that a lot of the mayors are new. We haven't looked at this file, especially the Fraser Highway portion, in some time. Give you a little bit of sense of what our starting point is for this work to refresh both the strategy and the Fraser Highway project. So from the last November meeting, the first thing that you did was endorse the suspension of the Surrey-Newton-Guildford LRT project. These are the other two resolutions that came forward that are guiding the feedback and direction that we're looking for today, specifically around what is that new vision for 27 kilometers, refreshed vision for 27 kilometers, what are the parameters for that? And then we brought forward three options for your consideration for a work plan. We're bringing forward more details around that option 2 that really straddles doing both a refresh strategy and a project development at the same time. This is a slide that's not in your package, but because of a number of questions that have come up since we distributed and posted that package, we thought it'd be important to provide some clarity. Taking from that resolution, number 2, part of that was to use in doing this refresh the available funding currently allocated for South of Fraser Rapid Transit in the Phase 2 plan. So that's what's been approved in the Phase 2 document. To be clear, that was 1.65 billion, which is about 1.6 billion remaining from the Surrey-Newton-Guildford LRT that could be applied, as well as $30 million that was approved in anticipation of project development for, at the time, an LRT project on Fraser Highway that could be repurposed. In addition, for the rest of the strategy for the 27 kilometers to draw from the financial framework for the Phase 3 plan. This was at the time assumed to be $1.9 billion for LRT along Fraser Highway. And as a result, if we're using that as the envelope, that's not yet been approved. There are some commitments to that, but it's not approved funding. Then we would be working with about $3.5 billion overall for the 27 kilometers of rapid transit on both corridors for the 10-year vision. So then thinking, and this is what this work plan will be oriented to, the initial construction project would have about $1.6 billion pending project approvals that could come forward fairly rapidly if it is approved by this body, the board, and by senior governments. And then we would be looking for remaining funding to complete that $3.5 billion 27-kilometer rapid transit plan. So the option 2 that came from the last meeting, you see the 27 kilometers outlined there, is to actually proceed immediately with the planning and design and procurement readiness, so to get ready for approvals, both with this body, with the board, and with senior governments, and to concurrently refresh the strategy. So there were a number of questions raised by this body that we're trying to address either in the information today or as part of the work plan that we'll be implementing if you endorse that. What we heard loud and clear is that we want to understand that the level of analysis that we're bringing to bear on the refresh to the strategy, as well as to a Skytrain project, is robust and is consistent with what we've done in the past, what was applied to the Broadway Subway project and the Surrey-Newton-Guildford LRT. There were questions about the scope of this refresh. I think the Mayor of White Rock wanted to know what about the connections. So we want to make sure we understand about not just the 27 kilometers, but what happens to all the other bus services and future plans. A number of questions related to what are the land use implications, either for shifting projects or what's our readiness level for moving forward with Fraser Highway project with our collaborations with the municipalities. And given the shift in priorities, what are the costs of delay on the available funding? So we've taken those questions and obviously our professional practice and tried to use these principles in developing the actual work plan that you're going to see today. We want to move quickly, but it's really important that we do so conservatively with our time frames, that we're realistic. We don't want to be overly optimistic and set expectations that can't be met either with you, with the public, or with senior governments. We want to make sure we're doing this really technically sound to be able to meet your needs, to be able to meet the public needs. Senior governments have their own requirements for business casing as well. We do, in order to hit that first bullet, we're suggesting that we would do a number of the work streams concurrently that in other projects previously we might have done sequentially so that we can speed some things up. Sandy will talk about that, both the opportunities and challenges of that. And we want to make sure that there are check-in points all the way with you and both with the board to make sure that we're passing through those stage gates and that you've seen the material and you're approving any decisions to move forward. And really importantly, that we're doing so best practice with engagement with the First Nations, with public stakeholders, so that there's buy-in for the strategy and that whatever project comes out of this is also deliverable. So we're proposing to do both of these things at the same time. The refresh on the bottom, really looking at the land use, the demand forecast, what alternatives now exist for us, we think could be done in roughly 8 months. The actual Skytrain project development, which working through the design phases that Sandy will go through, cost benefits, et cetera, at least 15 months to do so. So on the South of Fraser strategy refresh questions, There are a number of them that we'll go through. If the preference is for a Skytrain technology along Fraser Highway, we need to understand both within the demand forecasts as well as the funding that's available in the next 10 years, what options still exist from a technology perspective. What is the sequencing of those projects? So right now we've spoken of them as 2 corridors. The Surrey-Newton-Guildford corridor is one, but if we're looking at this again, is it actually 2 corridors? So we need to think about what are the right technologies, what are the choices, which implementation schedule do we use for those? How are the land use contexts changing, and there's interaction. If we put forward a transportation plan, that will change development patterns, so we need to understand what those are and what that means for the business cases. And then where is the public on this? And then per the bottom note, we're assuming that we're using that funding envelope per the direction from the last meeting.
Thank you, Jeff. So delving into what's in the 15-month schedule for getting to a business case that can be approved by senior government and this body and the TransLink board, what you see on this slide is the outline of approximately 11 steps we would need to take in the coming 15 months to allow us to have our due diligence and make sure we strike that balance between moving as quickly as we can while answering all the necessary questions for a really robust business case that can then be approved. So hitting some of the highlights, while we do have a basic design which was completed between 2015 and 2017, that design has a lot of assumptions in it which would need to be verified. And what item 1 is, which I'll touch on in the next slide, is a lot of the design requirements working with the City of Surrey would have to be verified. And that would involve also working with the communities that will be affected by this Skytrain line, making sure that they're supportive of the concept. We have many things which go into defining the cost of the project. Those include construction parameters, such as the length and duration of the work zones and the construction windows. Those are critical components in defining how quickly the line can be built and how much it will cost. Environmental reviews are essential. The line goes through some environmentally sensitive areas, including the Serpentine River, close to ALR. And Jeff mentioned the First Nations engagement. So those are items we haven't delved into in as much detail as we would for a proper business case. So that would be a big component of the next 15 months. Confirming demand and ridership profiles and the service patterns, that feeds right into the cost of both building, operating, and maintaining the system once it's up and running. Staging opportunities with the available funding. The design we've done up to 2017 assumed a one-shot project all the way to Langley, and that was the $2.9 billion cost estimate that we got. With the available funding of $1.6 billion, we'd have to ask ourselves, how far can we go? Where will the line stop? And how would we then stage the project to eventually get to Langley, potentially in 2 stages? So that work would need to be done. Project delivery model. Every project that goes to market needs to be delivered through a certain process, either design build, design bid build, design build finance. We'd have to explore those and go to market with a robust delivery model that makes sense for this project. We take all that input and update our design, and that allows us to then work with the municipalities on contributions, as we did for the LRT project and the subway project in Vancouver, allowing us to then update benefit cost ratios and have a business case ready for approval by this body and, of course, senior government. So that constitutes the work plan for the next 15 months. It's doable, it's achievable, it's realistic, but it requires all parties working diligently, cooperatively together, not just TransLink, but also various levels of government at the municipal level, as well as the province and the federal approval processes. Some of the design requirements which we need to delve into to ensure success are the number and location of stations. We're showing you in your package some of the thinking that went into the work in 2017 that would have to be verified. Where would the guideway be placed specifically on Fraser Highway, and especially with the station locations? How many lanes would remain on Fraser Highway? What do the turning movements look like at the intersections? There have been ideas floated by mayor and council in Surrey about at-grade alignments. We need to go into these and see what are the opportunities and implications, potential cost-saving opportunities or operational implications. Stations would need to be integrated with the communities. Access, elevators, escalators, how do you come and go to the stations? If we are doing this in stages and we need to stop in the interim, say at a location between King George and Langley, do we want to have park and ride facilities? Those were not part of the design we've done so far. What would that look like? And finally, implications on Skytrain storage and operations and maintenance facilities, especially if we're doing this in stages. Where would we be maintaining the cars and operating the system if we are doing this in stages? So those are some of the detailed requirements which would need to be the first step in defining how this project will proceed, and we'll be spending the first 3 months delving in with city staff and other stakeholders on these items. Slightly more detailed schedule than the one Jeff showed you earlier. This just shows how the 15 months will likely unfold, starting with that team recruitment, which we're ready to launch, and then the design requirements being the first quarter, progressing through developing the design, starting to draft the business case early. Within about 4 to 6 months, we'll be starting the drafting of the business case, defining the costs and benefits. This will all come into a refreshed investment plan, which needs to be adopted by this body and the board to allow us to then formalize the project. At the same time, we'll be working with senior government colleagues to navigate the approval of the business case through senior government, and then that would get us to issuing the RFQ in about 15 months' time, if all goes well. Between now and 15 months, we could be identifying early works, which would be needed along the corridor to enable the project, and so early works, design and construction could start within about that 15-month time frame. When we get to procurement in about 15 months, that launches a procurement phase, which typically would take about 15 months, followed by construction. The work done to date suggests about 4 years of construction, but that assumed going to Langley. If we're doing this in stages, and an interim stage is potentially short of Langley, we'll need to see how long that construction will take. And of course, that is very much dependent on the delivery model and the contractors who express interest in delivering this work. The big arrow at the bottom is just flagging all the supportive complementary actions that we'll be taking while the key components on the critical path are unfolding. Specifically with regards to consultation, we'll have several touch points with the public in working through all these issues. We'll go to the public early with a discussion on what we're doing and why we're doing it and the strategic alternatives. Then we'll be presenting them with what the reference case looks like for comments and feedback, and then we can go back and say this is what the project looks like given all the feedback, and get final confirmation, which is part of what's needed for the investment plan to come to you and to the TransLink board for approval. Critical touch points. Jeff mentioned we want to make sure you remain well informed and well engaged with check-in points. So we see at least 3 crucial check-in points with you. One is at the draft stage of the business case. When we've done a lot of the technical work and answered many of these questions, we'll come to you for a check-in, and we see that within about 7 to 8 months. Before the business case is finalized and shipped for approval by senior government would be another key touch point. And then finally, for the approval of the investment plan, both your approval and the board's approval would be needed. We can do this work with some tailwinds behind us. We're a region that knows Skytrain. We've done some work on this corridor, and so we do have familiarity. We've recently finished Evergreen. We're also working now on the Broadway subway project. So we have a lot of momentum behind us on Skytrain projects. So we're not starting from zero on this one, which would allow us to move fairly quickly on this work plan. We also we had set aside $30 million to work on developing a project for this corridor. So we have that in the budget, and we'll tap into that amount for the work plan I just described. With opportunities, there are always risks, and so the schedule will be facing certain risks. We need to move quickly on defining the design requirements I went over. We need agreements with the municipalities on things like the supportive policies agreement, and Memorandum of Understanding, partnership agreements, which are required for the Mayor's Council to approve these projects. We need to work within senior government approval timelines, and those timelines are not so much in the control of the region. We need to work very closely with colleagues at the province and the federal government to make sure we can facilitate and enable approval by treasury boards. Environmental reviews always carry a certain element of risk. When we start delving into what are the environmental risks and mitigations, that will be something we need to watch out for, and it could affect timelines. And of course, when we update the land use planning, when we update the ridership and the demand, we'll need to make sure that that business case remains robust, and that will be coming back to you to ensure that the costs and the benefits make sense. When we do go to market, if we're looking at a two-stage procurement, there is an element of complexity in going to market and telling contractors we're building stage one, which could become 2 stages should the money become available. We'd have to work through what that looks like. We're doing all this in an environment you all know well. There are plenty of big projects out there, not just locally and regionally, but also across Canada, many of them transit projects. So we are working with competing and concurrent priorities. Turn it back to Jeff.
So per our conversation in November on this, we are continuing to do some more detailed accounting on what expenditures have been made on Surrey-Newton-Guildford LRT. This has a number of implications. We have to understand exactly how much available funding we have remaining from that $1.65 billion at this point. Also, we need to be exploring if there are any reimbursements that are required of senior government. I can give you an interim peek into that. So far, that's looking good, that we probably will not have to do any major reimbursements to the federal or provincial governments based on the expenditures to date. We'll have to look at the write-downs potentially in the new year in 2019 if we do cancel the project, and which portions will we have to write down, and what will be the near-term financial implications for TransLink of that. We have done some updating to the expenditures in November. We were basing it both on what our our understanding of actuals in combination with what budgets were for some of those line items that you see, especially the pre-approval project works and the post-approval RFQ, so the things that were in progress. You can see that our most current estimates, which is the far right column, have come down about $9 million in that regards. And then secondly, there were some early works that we have been in process on or have completed as part of the PTIF work that were associated with the project. In examining one of those, which is the Guildford Exchange work, it is not part of the $1.65 billion Surrey-Newton-Guildford envelope. So that means that there is some more money available to the project from that $1.65 billion available. So you can see that the total expenditures right now we're estimating at just over $56 million as opposed to the $77 million that we had in earlier. That leaves us thus with about $1.6 billion as we understand it right now. There are other implications. I know there was direction from the Mayor's Council as part of the work planning to understand what those reimbursement obligations would be, both to the senior government as well as what contributions may the City of Surrey be looking to contribute to the project going forward in light of this as well. So one of the recommendations from management as part of the project development, we always develop project partnership agreements. We did so with the City of Surrey for the LRT project and with the City of Vancouver for the Broadway Subway project. Those need to be developed both on the land use components, the planning components, as well as the contributions, whether it be in kind or financial. Some of those could be land otherwise. City of Surrey was bringing significant resources to the LRT project. I would say that there will be, I would imagine there would be similar for this project, so we would work through the board and Mayor's Council is what we're recommending to see what's appropriate in that case and what the city is proposing to bring forward. So I mentioned that there are domino effects on our B-Line planning. The B-Line on Fraser Highway is well underway in the planning process. It was approved as part of the Phase 1 plan, recommended for the September 2019 launch. We are not planning right now on upgrading the 96 B-Line because we were assuming that we would be going into construction on that corridor and it would convert to an LRT, and in the meantime it would be impacted by construction, so it wouldn't warrant that expenditure. There's crowding on both corridors. The 96 B-Line, as somebody noted earlier, is the fastest growing bus line in the region. The Fraser Highway bus services are also overcrowded, so we need to make sure that we are investing in that corridor even in advance of the rapid transit line coming on. It's always, B-lines have generally been a precursor to rapid transit. Building that ridership is really important. But we want to make sure that the implementation of infrastructure on Fraser Highway, anything that we do is not lost, has major benefits in the near term and the longer term. Just quickly for an orientation, it is the same corridor, obviously 16.5 kilometers. Some of the key attributes of a rapid bus is the speed and reliability. We need to make sure that there are bus priority measures so that the speed is quick, the times are reduced, and that is faster than standard buses. And that means putting in signal priority, it means queue jumpers, it can mean transit priority lanes. If, as Sandy pointed to, that we're doing a staged construction, the northwestern part of that corridor could be under construction, and that fairly soon, and that would impact our ability to meet those service requirements of reliability, et cetera. So what we're proposing at this time is that we cancel the actual rollout of a B-line for the fall of 2019 on Fraser Highway. Instead, we take a portion of the infrastructure money, especially that would have been on that northeastern part of the line, apply that to the 96 B-line to be able to bring it up to the standard of the new B-line brand and product offering that we're going to be doing on the 4 new corridors across the region. But that we also put more services into that 96 B-line, knowing that it could be a bus for quite some time, as well as though we do need to put more service into Fraser Highway to deal with the overcrowding on those lines. We'll need to do some public consultation as a result of that on the service plan, and we'll look at what priority measures that we've already identified that we're about to go to tender on for the Fraser Highway still make sense in light of this shift, and we would work with municipal staff on that. Finally, the last part of this is just a little bit of an overview on the Fraser Highway work that we've done to date. Sandy talked a little bit of about the work that was done in comparing LRT and Skytrain between 2016 and 2017. The work obviously precedes that on why we have both Fraser Highway and the Surrey-Newton-Guildford as rapid transit corridors, going back to work that started in 2009 and then completed in 2012. So we have a lot of work on what those employment and residential projections are that warranted rapid transit on both corridors, but we'll need to continue to work with the municipalities on the near-term plans. These are the maps that show the density of population and employment. They work well as a series. You can kind of see 20 current, so this is 2016, versus what we're seeing in 2050. Obviously, the darker the color, the denser the line. So it shows that both corridors in 2050 have a lot more density than they do today. They're very different corridors, so we'll have to explore that. The Fraser Highway corridor right now attracts a lot of ridership from the township of Langley and Langley that doesn't necessarily come from development adjacent to the line. It feeds in through bus services to that line, and that will continue. That impacts this. We do have an alignment concept summary that informed what the costing estimates were. The 8 stations for Skytrain were identified, as well as one future station, I believe, at 148th. We looked at some of the bus exchange work. We understand what the Skytrain car requirements would be and what some of the maintenance facilities are. So this is based on both what was done in 2012 as well as that costing exercise that was done in 2016 and 2017. But it has not had public engagement on this. So things like understanding what the station houses would be, what the property impacts are, how they're aligned to the street. We did those for costing purposes. We need to work with the municipality and stakeholders and developers on what the exact alignment and configuration of those would be. We do have a good sense of what the potential ridership is. It was done, though, in an environment back in 2016 where we still had tolls on the Port Mann Bridge. That impacts ridership, so we'll need to be refreshing this. but we have a pretty good sense of what, as a starting point, of what the loads will be along the corridor. So this will be about refreshing that. So if the Mayor's Council adopts some resolutions regarding endorsing these work plans, our next step would be to check in with our board. We actually have a call scheduled or a meeting scheduled for tomorrow where they would consider the same work plans. And if that's endorsed, then that clock would start ticking. So all those timeframes that we showed were when we, from basically when we go from both bodies to be able to implement. We need to do a lot more work on what those engagement decision points are, how we work through the committee structure that was endorsed today, as well as with the board on those decisions. We need to work very quickly on the B-Line program, and then we would come back with some progress updates both either to the committee and or the full Mayor's Council in January. So I'll leave it at that. And here are the proposed resolutions, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation. We're now going to open it up to comments and questions from the Mayor's Council. Mayor Little.
Thank you, Chair Cote. I do have a motion to put on the floor.
So I would prefer to start with questions and discussion, and then we can entertain motions on the table. So if you can make comments in terms of the direction, and then once everyone's had an opportunity, then we can look at
Happy
motions.
to, at the appropriate time, we'll introduce it. I have some concerns about pursuing the both the we supported the cancellation of the Surrey-Newton-Guildford portion, and that has left us with about $56 million in costs which need to be recuperated going forward. We've also identified a funding gap of approximately $1 billion between the previous project and the new project. And I think that we need to address that issue first before we commence a planning project going forward. And so at the appropriate time, I'll be making a motion to put that forward. I also, hear throughout our community concerns that this project is being put forward without a business case being presented at the front end of the project. I do think that from the past planning project, we have enough information to say reliably that it's going to cost about $1 billion difference. But I think that at this time, we need to identify a source of funds as an alternate to regional taxation before we proceed any further on planning on this project. And so I have a motion to that effect when the time is right, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Little. Mayor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. So following on my comments at the last meeting back in November, this is something that frankly does very little for the folks that I represent in White Rock and very little for the folks that are in South Surrey. Mayor McCallum's folks, perhaps as close to as 100,000 people live in that area. And so my concerns are going forward with this. We're going to be up against it in terms of transit. And so what I have to say, I have one comment and one question. B-Line buses are absolutely essential to South Surrey and White Rock if this plan is going to go forward. I appreciate that everybody wants their share of the pie, and I have no problem with that, and I'll not sure how I'll vote on it, but that's another issue. The point is there's two hubs that basically our folks are going to be able to go to. One is in Richmond, Mayor Brody's area, and the other one is Central Surrey. Those are the areas they're going to go to for some time now to probably hook into Skytrain. That's our transit system. So B-Line buses are absolutely essential, and both of those directions need to be seen to, whether it's 99 or whether it's the King George Highway, and it may eventually become 152nd as well. So that's my comment. My question is, are we absolutely stuck on Bombardier? A couple of the presentations earlier identified that maybe we might want to look around, that there are some other options for what this Skytrain may look like as it goes forward. So, I'm concerned a business plan that may or may not be in place, but that has to include the technology that we're going to use. Are we buying older technology because that's what we're used to? Are we looking around for newer stuff? Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll refer that question to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. We are not stuck with Bombardier. We've been out in the market talking to various suppliers of rail cars, and there's interest in the market to compete for our business. with the investment plan approved by this body last year. We have a very large order of cars upcoming, which gives us strength in the marketplace and allows us to gain a lot of momentum and gather interest from various suppliers. So we're expecting to go to an RFP for our next big order of cars next year, and we're expecting it to be open to various suppliers.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Brody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have many concerns about this situation, and I want to address what Mayor Little talked about on the costs, but I just want to clarify this because as I understand it, if this goes forward, it will be presented in consultation and in discussions as a two-phase plan, going to Fleetwood and then going to Langley. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, we have to figure out exactly how much can be built for whatever it is, if it's $1.6 billion. But yes, the segment, based on our current understanding, we're not going to be able to go all the way.
And so under your materials, you're presenting it, you're saying we've got 1.65, how far will that take us? And then you're projecting into the next phase where you expect it to be 1.9. So, and your thinking at this time is that that will cover the cost of the entire Skytrain if that's what's decided.
Yes, and I guess that's the direction, up to the direction of the Mayor's Council and the board, but that's what we took as the guiding principle for the 27 kilometers, that's the approved allocation.
All right. I have a number of concerns about the costs, and particularly about the costs that we are throwing away. I mean, if there's one area where TransLink over the years has been criticized heavily, and just think of the referendum and what we went through, it is the entire question of cost containment and the wise use of resources. I'm interested to hear what exactly the motion is, and I may consider another one if need be. I've got a couple more questions, though. I am concerned based on what the delegations told us today and what the people of Surrey have I'm sure we've all gotten their emails from the people of Surrey. What do we know about what the people of Surrey want? I realize that there's been a council resolution to say, do this instead of do that. But what do we really know about the wishes?
Mayor Brody, I think we can't be certain, so that's why the actual work plan, both for the refresh of the South of Fraser rapid transit strategy and the project development, include upfront consultation to understand.
But the previous plan, fully approved, fully led by Surrey, who, you know, at that time the mayor was the vice chair of this body, there was full public consultations. And you know, paraphrasing, I don't remember the specific wording, but I presume.
Okay, order. The Mayor Brody has the floor, please.
Presumably, what you're saying is that your consultation may be flawed because we asked the question because we heard talk of Skytrain instead of the SNG LRT. So are you acknowledging, yes, that consultation could be flawed?
So we are acknowledging, I think we did at the last meeting as well, that the process to go from the mayor's vision in 2014 then to the sort of phase one plan. In the mayor's vision, we went from a short list of technologies, including on Surrey-Newton-Guildford corridor, LRT, or BRT, and on the Fraser Highway, any one of the three technologies, that the Mayor's Council vision made that selection process. We hadn't gone through a detailed consultation at the end on that short list. We then went forward, though, through the process of developing a phase one investment plan back in 2016 that included public consultation on that proposal of the Surrey-Newton-Guildford LRT, the Broadway subway, and then future planning for the Fraser Highway LRT. So that would have been the public consultation. With the approval of that plan, we then did very detailed LRT consultation as part of the project development to be able to get to the procurement readiness that we are.
Did you ever suggest to the Mayor's Council or the TransLink Board that there are serious concerns about whether the LRT options, the two different parts of the route, were appropriate rather than Skytrain to Surrey or to Langley?
So what I would say, Mayor, is that we provided the options and the trade-offs between both LRT and Skytrain, given the accounts that we had, and it was up to you to weigh, up to the policymakers to weigh those options. There wasn't a fatal flaw with either one of those. They're both good technologies, and they could fit on either corridor. There are pros and cons, and you weighed that, and then we went forward with LRT.
What do we know about the expectations in terms of densities for the Surrey to Langley Skytrain if that should proceed? Because I do remember that the Surrey-Newton-Guildford LRT had some very specific obligations by the City of Surrey to increase densities along that route, which would, then feed right into the line.
So we have the land use projections from Metro Vancouver that underpin the actual project business cases or the work that we've done so far, and that would underpin the starting point. What we did is then added a layer of that for the Surrey-Newton-Guildford corridor by working with Surrey, who developed neighborhood plans, and they had amended their OCP, et cetera, that gave us better visibility into both increased density, population, employment, and then the rate of development. We have not undergone that on the Fraser Highway corridor. In conversations with the city managers in all three municipalities that would be impacted, they are open and planning on doing a bunch of the work that would be similar to what was done for Surrey, Newton, Guildford.
Is that contemplated by your recommendations?
It would be, yes, that it would be part of the partnership agreements. I know that the City of Langley is already in the procurement process to be doing some amendments to look at their OCP to be much more transit-oriented, and we would be looking to do the same thing with Surrey, though we don't have a lot of time to understand what that development would be. As I mentioned, Mayor Brody, the development along the Fraser Highway is a different beast than on King George and on 104th, where the development in Township of Langley is really important to the business case because a lot of people feed into longer trips.
All right, so I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair, but I will say that I'm concerned with the wishes of the people of Surrey, regardless of what their very learned council has given us by way of a resolution. And I'm very concerned about the cost, particularly the cost thrown away.
Okay, thank you. Mayor McEwen.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring to light a lot of work that had been done, and it's sort of a follow-up to comments that I made at the last Mayor's Council meeting. The Mayor's 10-year plan was completely, designed on compromise that we're getting the best bang for the buck. I'm worried now about what we've just heard in regards to moving forward with a bunch of expenditures that TransLink is going to have to bear in regards to doing a whole new design work when we don't even have the proposed funding in place that we all realize is going to be close to $1 billion. And I agree with Mayor Little's comments that this needs to stop until we get that in place. As was reported in the news over the last 24 hours, the federal government and provincial governments are tapped out on this project. And I can certainly tell you my municipality is tapped out as well. We had a tough time coming up with our last $15 million to make the initial plan work. And there was a lot of wrestling over how that was going to come from. We got it, and that's where we're at. I think everybody around this table needs to quickly realize, though, the longer this goes on, the less that we possibly are going to be able to achieve our goal of a plan to transit connection to Langley. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Richard Stewart.
Mayor McEwen just said it. The plan was built, in fact, on compromise. In fact, I think lines in the past have been built on compromise. The Evergreen line was supposed to be LRT. When I became mayor, we were working on the design of an LRT line. It was only when, in fact, I remember sitting on a committee as a council member, working with the preliminary designs for the LRT stations on the Evergreen line. It was the provincial government that made the decision it was going to go Skytrain. So we quickly, well, I guess 6 years is quickly, but quickly adapted to become a Skytrain line, which is a completely different urban form. But we changed our OCP and we changed some stuff in order to make that work. And so I agree with those that are suggesting we need to pause here a little bit, because there's a whole lot of, we weren't as advanced on the LRT for Coquitlam as I believe as it has advanced for the Surrey-Langley line. So I'm left with the challenge that if the people of Surrey want an option other than what was worked out, and that's essentially what other communities have been offered. Coquitlam was finally able to secure a rapid transit line to Coquitlam Centre. We wanted the last kilometre underground. The bill was presented to us. If you want that, it's $100 million. We opted not to do that. We wanted another station. The bill was about $25 million. We actually paid for that. Coquitlam paid the extra because that wasn't in the plan. I think that's certainly up to them, and we ought to then contemplate how the change in design now affects the schedule. Obviously, we can't go the full length initially, and in any case, and it probably has some delays that are years long. And we've also got to deal with how we cover the sunk costs and how we cover the extra costs, because obviously if Coquitlam can't get an extra station without paying for it entirely ourselves, I don't know how we envision other communities getting a completely different technology without actually funding it. And so that's where I'm coming from right now. I think we're challenged as a community to be able to understand how this is unfolding.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor McCallum.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I, on behalf of our staff and the city and our council, do support the recommendations that are before us. And I would say to the Chair on procedure, it is the procedure of this board, which I have chaired for many years, is that the motion, first of all, is always given to staff on the recommendations before any new motions are put on the floor. And I would also suggest to the Chair that through your own procedures, that any new motions that come forward have to give a 5-day notice to this board. So that's on procedure. As far as the process is concerned and what's in the report, the residents of Surrey, I can assure you, I can assure everybody in this room, in overwhelming numbers support Skytrain over light rail. The past council campaigned as their #1 issue on light rail in the city of Surrey, and the Safe Surrey Coalition, which I headed up, #1 issue, or we had 2 main issues, but certainly one of those 2 main issues was Skytrain, not light rail. The results of the election is a referendum on what type of system the residents of Surrey want. We literally, and I can say it, and I've said it before, we wiped every one of the past council out of office on the basis that they still wanted light rail, and the residents of Surrey want it in overwhelming numbers. It wasn't even close. And so I can assure everybody that Skytrain is what the city of Surrey residents in well over 80%, if not more, want to see in the city. So on that basis, there's no question what the residents want to see. As far as what we've been working as a staff, we've had good cooperation with TransLink staff over the last month from the last Mayor's Council. We have dedicated our staff, a number of them, and TransLink has also worked with them, and they currently are working very good towards this work plan that's before you now. And they continue as we sit here today to work on that plan. And I think it's really important to recognize what senior levels of government, and I too have, along with the Mayor of Vancouver, talked to all the senior levels of the government, both provincially and federally. And they have all indicated to me that in our region, they look at our region as a metro region, not individual cities. They look at it as a metro region. And this board needs to look at it as a metro region. Instead of hearing sometime that my city did this or my city did that, we need to look at the metro system. And the concept that both the province and the federal government, certainly in my discussions with them, is the fact that if we were to do Skytrain along Fraser Highway and the Broadway corridor out to UBC, that concept is the backbone of our rapid transit system in our region. It goes from one end to the other, and it will be the best thing as we look forward, not just to the 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, as we look forward to the next 100 years. And so we need to move quickly, and I'm glad to hear every other sentence is that we do need to move quickly. And when I have the opportunity, Chair, I would like to move the recommendations. No, I'm not going to do it now. When the opportunity comes, I would like to be able to move the recommendations.
Okay, so just a comment on the procedural issues, and I will ask for a little bit of lenience with the group as I am quickly coming up to speed with a lot of our code of conduct, and Mike has kind of given me a few responses there. First of all, in terms of the 5 days notice for new motions, generally that would apply to something that would be new business, but if it is related to the report and the work we're doing, it is something that can be accepted in a meeting. But to your point, the Mayor's Council's practice has been to use the recommendation of the report as a starting point. Mike Wood, I don't know if you can add any further details in terms of that.
Yeah, so that's correct. So our rules of procedure don't specify. I know as some municipal councils do, the staff reports recommendations and staff reports are deemed moved and seconded. That's not been that's not what our rules say. That we could change our rules, but right now it's as the chair stated. So our past practice has been to use these as a starting point, but it's not specified so in the rules.
Okay, so I'm going to continue to go around for first-time speakers on the issue before I entertain any motions. Mayor Buchanan.
Thank you very much, Chair Cote. Just a comment around the fact that I do very much, just based on the comment that was made, we need to be thinking about this as a metro region and a regional issue, and this is very much a regional issue. In fact, what we should be talking about is how we're solving regional transportation issues and not delivering technology preferences that one municipality prefers over another. And I guess my concern is that this council put a halt on the SNG LRT at the last meeting, which is what Surrey wished for. That's what was asked for in your referendum or your election. But what we're also hearing is from a number of delegations and people that we're receiving emails from that are very concerned about the costs. And I am concerned about the costs that we are being left to either just forego because it's already been spent and we're now looking at a different technology, or that we are going to have to go back to our, as Director McEwen said, go back to our individual municipalities and look at ways in which we're going to fund an extra $1 billion. And I can tell you in my community, when we're starting to look at the major capital infrastructure costs that are coming down for utilities, that is not something that I think we're prepared on the North Shore to go back to say we need more money to be looking at a sudden change that actually then precipitates a number of other changes around B-Line buses, which is another cost. So I think at this point, I think I do have concerns. I'd like to hear further from Director Little in terms of his motion that he wants to put on the floor. But I think what we need to do is look at that detailed business plan and look at how we're going to then move on to the next phase of the plan and solve it for the region and not one particular area who's decided at the last minute or at a point in time of an election that the technology needs to change. Because I can tell you that on the North Shore as well, we are the only regional town center that has put the density in, that has the employment there, that doesn't have rapid bus lines. And we are still waiting for that. So I'm happy to hear what Director Little has to say, but at this point, I think that we need a much more detailed business plan before we make any, give any direction to staff to move forward on a work plan for Skytrain from Surrey to Langley. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I understand Jeff just had a comment that he wanted to respond.
Just want to be clear, and I know that we're moving quickly on this, that the work plan is different than approval of the project. So the work plan is actually to refresh the strategy to be able to answer what can we build for $3.5 billion in the 10 years for the 27 kilometers, to do the work that Sandy's team and the consultants, et cetera, would be out there on consultation and understand how much this project would cost, the Skytrain project, and then how much could be built for $1.6 billion, and then bring that forward to you. So it's not approval at this time of this is the technology. We need to get more information, including consultation, understanding where this is, to be able to advance that. So it's not just a green light on this is the project and away we go.
So, can I do a follow-up question? Thank you very much for that, Mr. Cross. But what I would ask then, though, is recognizing that it's not a green light, but what is the cost then of staff time and consultation to do that piece of work, which actually is then, in essence, time and money being spent and energy not focused on looking at other parts of the system that need to move forward. So, is there a cost estimate to that?
There is, yeah, absolutely. There is an opportunity cost, to your point, that we do have $30 million in development in the budget. We don't think it will take that much, but we're probably on the order of $20 million to bring the business case forward to procurement levels.
And that $30 million is coming out of what we currently have, correct?
Correct. It was allocated and approved in the Phase 2 plan as Fraser Highway project development costs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Vandenbroek.
Great, thank you. I support Mayor Stewart and Mayor McCallum in the fact that Langley City would like the Skytrain option as well. We've been deemed a regional hub for a very long time, and the Fraser Valley feeds into us. And the highway is bottlenecking. People are cutting through our city with their cars, and we'd like to see that reduced. Langley City has been 100% committed since the plan has changed. Well, we were before, don't get me wrong, but we have been, as you stated, our staff has been working closely with you to change these plans. We do have a Nexus plan that we've brought forward. It's a comprehensive plan that predicts our growth, and we are going to have huge growth within Surrey's population is going to outnumber Vancouver within a year or two. We need to be prepared for that. As well, we are looking at our OCP to amend it. Part of the solution of having the SkyTrain come to Langley City and building high density around it will address the housing issues that is number 2 or number 1 on the list, depending on where you were campaigning. During my campaign time in Langley City, I hit every household south of the Nickel-Mackle about 3 times. So we're looking at about 3,000 residents with, 1 to 5 people in each house. I only had one person tell me they wanted LRT. Everyone else was questioning why we would switch for this side of the Fraser River to LRT. It would cause traffic flow problems, less people Skytrain would move more people faster. And long-term, as a region, for a 50-year plus plan, when you add more trains to the LRT, it takes you more time to get from point A to B. When you do that with Skytrain, 21 minutes is 21 minutes, from my understanding. So with way more people, Skytrain is the better option. And my only concern, though, is, as we've seen in this report, the capacity for our buses for the 502 and the 503 are at capacity already. We are maxed out. Like I said, we are getting all the residents coming in from Abbotsford and Chilliwack, and some people past that who are actually working in downtown Vancouver. Like I said before, there's a reason why Highway 1 is blocked all the time. So my only concern with this is that we were finally promised a B-Line to address our issues of overcrowding. So we need to see this phase 3 move forward for us. Otherwise, Langley City is stuck again, being ignored, where we've paid our fair share of the taxes. We've waited a really long time for everybody else to get their connections. We're finally going to get it, and now it's a point of no Skytrain and no bus system. So,
okay. Thank you for your comments. Mayor Dingwall.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respect the important principle of broad public consultation, particularly on significant projects. But it's not apparent to me that the new plan has received transparent and meaningful public consultation and engagement since it came through the election process. And I think all of us have gone through the election process, and we run on a number of platforms. And this is not like a specific referendum where you have a specific question with context and background that our citizens can then form their decision around, in this case, between LRT and Skytrain. And when you add to the mix the $1 billion increase, that's a significant context piece, I think, that helps frame that question of which way you go on a referendum. But for me, I'm very concerned about the increased costs in terms of capital, but also operating. The loss of the $58 million, that's a concern. And again, revenue generation for the new project. I don't want it to affect the whole region for the next 50 years because of increased costs, because of the technology that is used. And so for me, again, I would have much preferred a business case that laid it out at the beginning, as opposed to investing more dollars over the next 15 months with a view to approving this. And again, on the last one, and I wasn't here at the table when they dealt with even dealing with the $15 million that was required to finish off that budget. But what it did, the 1.5 cent tax increase for our region, where our drivers are spending more time moving out of the community, driving further distances, it's a significant impact on our people, both in terms of their time, their car repairs, and also the gas costs of driving. And so at the end of the day, if this was all cost neutral, I'd be 100% behind Surrey and Langley, absolutely no question. But I don't want it to affect the whole region for many, many years to come, nor to drive up revenue costs that are going to come from citizens that are outside the South Fraser corridor. And so, again, for me, I think having that business case, understanding the full implications around the costs and who's going to pay. I particularly took notice of the project partnership agreement, which is a new term that I've learned since coming here. And again, I think that's where it is important, like Mayor Stewart said in Coquitlam, that if you want the extra stuff, then you have to step forward and pay for it from that city. And so I don't know what those incremental costs are. I don't know what Surrey and Langley's positions are in terms of funding that extra shortfall, if there is one, and beyond what will happen in Surrey with the loss of the LRT for the Newton-Surrey corridor. But understanding that would even help me. And if that's covered off by those cities, then frankly, their wishes should carry the day. But for me, it's about revenue. It's about that gap in funding.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Prose.
Well, thank you very much, and really appreciate the debate. I appreciate the delegations that came and spoke to us today and about this technology change that we're discussing. I want to talk a little bit about how we got here from my point of view, and being the last remaining standing mayor from the South of Fraser from the last election, not counting Mayor McCallum, who has made a great comeback. But during the time, okay, well, yeah, we kind of Richmond. We're never sure. There's a Fraser cuts through it, and when we need them, they're with us. When we don't, then they're sorry, Mayor Brody. We'll count you in. But there were a few meetings that were held, and I recall quite clearly in the City of Surrey, with mayors from Delta, White Rock, Surrey, City of Langley, and Township of Langley during the investment committee to build the 10-year vision. And one thing that we wanted to be sure of is that we didn't get forgotten and we didn't get lost, and we got some of the important transportation needs south of the Fraser, including Richmond, that we required. And I heard the word compromise, and certainly there was a compromise. We were building a regional plan. We were building a plan that was to benefit every municipality within this region. And not everybody could get what they got. And I know when we sat together, we took my Langley hat off, and we all took our hats off. We looked at what's best for South of Fraser. Can we get this into the plan? And we came up with some visions and some ideas. And I know Mayor Watts and then Mayor Hepner were very, and their staff were very sold on LRT. And there are, like I say, compromises. And so when you have a municipality the size of Surrey with looking at 27 kilometers of rail, and one of them is going to come into the Langleys, you kind of have to realize who's the dog and who's the tail. And I wanted to ensure that we got some rail to Langley to help our community, our growing community. We're the fastest growing by percentage community in the region, to get our residents to where they have to go. So the 10-year vision took an LRT. We came to a good conclusion, I think, and pretty much unanimous by the mayors to accept the 10-year vision so we could move forward. Since that time, things changed. City of Surrey had an election, a new mayor, a new council, and as we've heard, they campaigned on Skytrain, and it's going to be very hard for TransLink to build light rail in Surrey without the cooperation of the municipality. I think we all recognize that. So that really changes it. And I think this council last meeting, when they put pause on the Surrey-Newton-Guildford line, we're willing to consider that. So we're at a point now where we're talking about a technology. Are we going to change the technology? The staff, and I think we're very similar to the City of Langley, the staff of the Township of Langley, were always supportive of Skytrain. But politically, compromise, you work, you try to get the best for the region. We went with the LRT. That's changed. Skytrain is the best technology along the Fraser Highway as far as I'm concerned, but we still have to fund it. Phase 2 funding put $30 million on the table, which I'm glad it stayed. We want to have more on the table to go for the Fraser Highway line, but $30 million is there for design work. That's still there. Whether it's design of light rail or Skytrain, the money's there. The money that's already been spent, we need to deal with. No question, that has to be dealt with. $56 million is a lot of money. However, I believe there's a way forward to that in my conversations with Mayor McCallum and I know with Mayor Cote, is that there's an MOU. We're going to have to look at efficiencies that we can work with Surrey on building this line. There's land and rights of ways that are going to be required, same as Vancouver, doing the Broadway line we've had discussions previously with, and we'll have to have those discussions with Surrey. And I know that there's ways that we can, as a body, feel comfortable that that money or most of it has not been poorly spent and that we're getting that back in another way. So I think we can take care of that, and that's in the plan. And the other thing I've heard is that we need to get to a business plan before we can make a decision. Well, that business plan takes 15 months. And unless this body is able to give staff the direction to start doing that business plan, we're not going to have that information to make a decision. I think it's important that we look at this and say, let's move forward, let's give them direction to get to the business plan so we have better information, because we don't have that information. And just a final point is that the phase 2 was to provide Surrey-Newton-Guilford line, light rail. Phase 3 was the Fraser Highway line, and we knew that phase 3 was $1.9 million to build Fraser Highway line light rail, and now we're looking at $2.9 million. The City of Surrey is offering to take the light rail off the table and put that money towards Fraser Highway line. So we still have to find phase 3 funding. That was one of my campaign goals, was this term, let's get the phase 3 funding and finish the 10-year plan. That's important. So we still have that work to do, but we don't know how far $1.6 million will take us. We know that get started on it, and my goal, just personally, is to work with other levels of government to make sure we get the funding to take it all the way to Langley. And we always did need phase 3 funding for that. That's not a new thing. Phase 2 will take us part ways. Surrey has made us an offer to change the technology. The money is being switched into the technology. And we do need to recognize that we have to ensure that there's bus rapid transit or some other transit that'll recognize the Surrey-Newton-Guilford line and give them the transit that they need. And one thing that we're going to lose in Langley, if this goes forward, is we're going to lose the B-Line buses on the Fraser Highway line. That funding is going to go to the Surrey-Newton-Guilford line. So rather than having us step up and getting some buses in there next year, which may not happen now, we may be delayed on that. We're going to even suffer even more on transit in the view of getting the Skytrain construction started. But that money is there, and it can be sent over to provide better busing on the Surrey-Newton-Guilford line. So just for staff, I just want a clarification if I'm on track here. The money for the B-Line is going to Surrey-Newton-Guilford, and will that provide adequate bus rapid transit for them? And to get to the business plan, you need direction from us. Is that correct?
You're correct on both fronts. I would say, Mayor Froese, that on the B-Line piece, some of the money would go, and I heard the concerns from the Mayor of Langley City. Some of the money we are projecting to move or proposing to move to the 96 B-Line. Not all of it, because we do need to meet the service needs from the Langleys coming in. And potentially even some of the transit priority that makes sense regardless whether you were doing a B-Line or not. Now the 96 B-Line has some transit priority, so what we would be proposing is looking at some additional opportunities but increasing the service to the new standard. Now I wouldn't call that bus rapid transit yet, that's a B-Line. And to your point, what the work plan proposes to do is to say, okay, if the proposal is we had $3.5 billion between the phase 2 and the phase 3. Now go away and staff develop a plan, work with the community, and come back and say, what do those projects look like, including a Skytrain along Fraser Highway to deliver 27 kilometers, which to your point could include bus rapid transit or other options on those other corridors, and how much can you build over that. We would come back with that in the course of the next 6 to 8 months to show you what that plan looks like, including the phasing on how we would use the currently allocated money and what the options are, looking for a milestone decision then to continue to proceed.
Okay, so we have 2 more speakers, and then after that I am going to entertain some motions and look for some directions, but we're going to start with Mayor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair Cote. My questions are for Mr. Cross. Of course, the small hillside community of Lions Bay is a little north of the Fraser River, and we're about 35 kilometers from the nearest Skytrain station, so certainly my residents, through me, are going to be voting with the spirit of the greater good versus a bunch of the other items that have been covered here. So my questions are 2 for Mr. Cross, and I'll ask them both because you're going to have to go north or south on one of them. And this goes to Mayor Brody's comment about cost containment and expenditures. With the slides that you presented, the expenditures are in the billions. And I'm going to presume that within those billions of dollars, there's some contingency estimates. If you're able to tell us what they are, or just confirm that that's the case, that'd be fine. And then there's a second question, and that's that there are claims that the project, as TransLink has proposed, that the costs are overstated, and that savings could be made of significant magnitude, and that the people who make these claims have been at this for some time. So my question to you is, I'm going to presume if these people have made the claims, you probably called them, or if you haven't, the ultimate question is, do you amend your estimate? And to you, sir.
So Sandy may help me on this one, but on the estimates that we've made, as would be appropriate at this time for alternatives, there's always a contingency included, and the contingency changes as you get more defined and refined with your development of the project. So yes, there is a contingency. Based on the construction methodology that we looked at in 2016 and 2017, we think we stand by the engineering estimates that were done. There have been some alternatives proposed about how you may construct it, whether vertical alignment or horizontal, how much Fraser Highway is needed, et cetera. The timing, are you working 24/7, the period, those are things that we would need to explore that will impact our cost estimates as we go forward. So based on what our estimates were, what was used for our recent example on Evergreen, based on what was used for procurement for the Broadway subway project, we feel pretty solid in the approaches of what we've been doing, but we'll have to continue to refine that.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Bielinke.
My primary concern with this conversation as a new mayor is that we've jumped to the debate about Skytrain versus LRT in many cases without advance confirmation that there's funding approval. If there's no capital approval available, there's no conversation about where it might be allocated. If there's $1 billion sitting out there, and we can all try and secure capital for our municipalities for whom we're here to represent, but without confirmation that there's $1 billion sitting out there just waiting to be able to augment an existing approved plan that already achieved consensus, it seems to me like a massive distraction to focus on the debate for LRT versus Skytrain versus where's the $1 billion coming from. I would encourage us to focus on the $1 billion question rather than where the capital is going to be allocated.
Okay, so just to kind of jump into this discussion at this point here, I think I do want to focus us on the $1.6 billion question, which is the funding that we have secured and we do have available. At our last Mayor's Council meeting, we did actually put some financial parameters around the decisions that we're making. Number one, we have indicated whatever direction we do with respect to rapid transit in South of the Fraser is to stay within the budget of the funding amount of the $1.6 billion that we have already secured. We've also, in that meeting, put a budget parameter approximately around $3 billion for the total cost that would include Phase 3, which is not funded yet. No doubt the decisions that we are making in the direction that this is taking us down in terms of reprioritizing the order of Fraser Highway and changing the technology are significant decisions. What I'm hearing around the table is and I'm not hearing, actually what I'm not hearing around the table, steps that do need to be followed to be able to make those decisions, because even going ahead with Skytrain on the Fraser line is going to have implications with less funding available for the Newton and Guildford corridor. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't be able to have options, but there will be less options available for us as a body into the future there. So, I think we're doing the best to be able to respond to a change in the direction there, which I think does need to be respected around this body. As Mayor Froese mentioned, I think plowing ahead with the previous plan with a light rail project without the support of a local municipality would have been fraught with complications and ultimately would lead to an unsuccessful project here. So I think the real decision that we're ultimately going to be working on today is not whether the $1.6 billion should be allocated south of the Fraser, because I'm not hearing from anyone that that's not the case. It's about what are the processes in terms of the decisions we have. Are we comfortable with what's been outlined from TransLink staff as the next steps? Procedurally, I am going to stick with our past practice to start with the staff recommendation as a starting point for our discussion. I've just had an opportunity to see the motion that was going to be proposed by Mayor Little. I actually think what he is proposing can be added on because it is requiring some additional work, but it is not necessarily, I think it actually can be complementary. I will leave it up to the mover whether they feel it can be added or if it has to be considered a separate motion altogether, and that this motion would have to be defeated. But I do think a starting point would be to have the staff recommendation put on the floor, and then we can either consider amendments, or if the body wishes to defeat that motion, then we would consider alternative motions at that particular point in time. So with that, I am going to look to Mayor McCallum to move the original staff recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will move the recommendations of the staff that are before us.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded, and that's on the table. I now do want to go to Mayor Little to ask either for comments, amendments. I'll leave that with Mayor Little.
Well, again, this is my first month on this body. I'm jumping into the deep end on a really big motion here, but so any direction you may give. I think that it does materially change item 1 from the original motion, and so I'd be curious on your comments on how you think it's complementary rather than in opposition.
Well, I think in my defense, I've been trying to chair a meeting and read a motion at the same time, so I have only casually been able to look at what you proposed.
Absolutely. May I read the motion into the record and just so we can have that discussion? Is that fair? Okay, so then the motion that I would propose is that as a replacement to 1A and B, this would go in, which would be that Mayor's Council of Regional Transportation, 1A, directs TransLink to identify alternate sources of revenue other than the regional taxation to address the difference in cost of approximately $1 billion between the previously supported LRT S&G Phase 1 project and the proposed Skytrain route along the Fraser Highway to Langley, and the approximately $56 million spent on planning the previous LRT Phase 1, which was initiated in good faith with Surrey's support and subsequently canceled at Surrey's request. And 1B, report back to the Mayor's Council prior to commencing a planning project on the expansion of Skytrain south of the Fraser.
Okay, so I guess just my initial comments in terms of those points. Number one, in terms of the money that has been already spent on the light rail project, it is embedded in the work plan that would be part of the partnership agreement. I don't actually see that contradicting in terms of what you're saying, unless you're saying that needs to be dealt with before we can move forward with any planning work. In terms of the additional billion dollars, I think the previous direction that we made at the Mayor's Council meeting is that we were going to keep within the funding envelopes that we do have available for Phase 2. More work needs to be done. Exactly what could be built with that particular project, but that Phase 3 would also remain within the same funding limit as has always been contemplated, which no doubt may have an effect on the level of service and technology options available. But at no point in what we're considering is actually adding $1 billion to our funding plan. So I don't know, Mayor Little, if that's.
May I ask one question of the mover then? Do you not see this as materially changing your motion if I put this in as an amendment?
I think because your wording's not right before me, your intent on it is to change, and I think that's the important part. The wording of the motion, I would agree with the chair, but except I haven't before me and I can't see all the wording in it. I would agree with the chair's comments on that. My problem is that your intent, as you stated it for this, is opposite to what the interpretation.
Provide some context and comments.
Well, sure.
Can I just ask a point of clarification?
Okay, point of clarification, Mayor Buchanan.
I'm just curious why the staff recommendation is a recommendation that automatically goes to the floor. It's a staff recommendation.
So as I mentioned before, it is the past practice of this body to use that as a starting point for discussion, and I have made the decision to continue that past practice.
Okay.
Okay, I will now have Mike Buda.
Well, I was going to say, what's before you around developing, endorsing this work plan to start the project development work on Skytrain on Fraser, as well as the planning process, is absolutely dependent on the previous direction you provided, which is to stick within the $1.6 billion. So, whereas I think I hear Mayor Little commenting that before proceeding to make decisions on what would happen for developing a project that requires more than $1.6 billion, that this body really needs to determine how they would fund this. And I think this reflects what Mayor Cote just said, that that was always the need for the Phase 3 plan. There are a whole bunch of projects in the Phase 3 plan, including, as we've said, more funding for South of Fraser rapid transit, B-lines across the region, more general bus and handy dart service. We are going to need to enter into a very significant debate here fairly quickly about how we're going to fund the Phase 3 plan. Partly, we need to get federal provincial funding in place, and then once that's in place, whatever money is left that we need to provide to advance Phase 3, we either need to reduce the scope of Phase 3 to make it affordable with senior government funding, or we need to decide how we're going to use regional funding. So I would suggest actually that in some ways, embedding a recommendation into what's before you that clarifies that this region is going to have a debate about how to fund projects in the Phase 3 plan, which includes whatever else we need to build along Fraser Highway, as well as all other projects, would in fact be useful. It will set up, as part of this process, the Phase 3 funding debate that'll happen. And then I think the second part of your motion, Mayor, was around the money that's already been spent. Again, we've got direction from you already. It's not actually here. It was from the last meeting, that needs to be part and parcel of the project development process, specifically as part of the project partnership agreement, which needs to be signed between the Mayor's Council and the City of Surrey. And until that agreement's signed, this body wouldn't be able to approve this project either. So again, actually, I think referencing that would be a useful additional specific direction, although we've already received it, additional direction to staff.
Okay, so the question for this body with respect to this motion is, does this body potentially want to add anything additional that would further clarify or direct work that would go along with this? Or does this body feel that this work is premature before other work is done? And if that is the case, the correct procedure would be to vote down the motion and then propose an alternative motion. But if there's feeling that the additional work or additional processes can be embedded in this work, then I would look for an amendment. Mayor Brody.
A couple of things occur to me, Mr. Chair, just in conjunction with your last remarks. Now, what's on the floor is the recommended resolution, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. It seems to me a lot of what Mayor Little has said could be done by way of a simple referral motion, referring this motion back to staff to put together the business plan and to report back. And I'll make that motion.
Okay, that motion has been made to refer this motion back to staff to report back with a business plan, essentially before this motion can be considered. And I'm just going to, I would want to get staff's thoughts as to what the implications of that motion before we actually vote or discuss it. So order, please. I'll ask all members of the audience.
I guess a question of clarification to Mayor Brody then is the intent to resolve the question that Mayor Little's motion poses about how the funding gap that remains for what we're considering to be Phase 3, but is also associated with this project, is filled before we proceed with the work program?
I'm talking about a complete business plan.
Okay.
That's only one aspect of it from my point of view.
Yeah, so and I guess we're just having maybe some nomenclature, because this is what we see as the development of a business plan going forward, which doesn't address the Phase 3 funding gap that would be required to get us from our current estimate all the way to Langley and to complete then the other rapid transit within the $3.5 billion. That would be identified as far as what those needs would be by sort of month 8 or 9 in this business plan development, but it wouldn't solve that at this time. Because we had never planned to, we don't know yet where the federal allocations, Mike's earlier item about federal engagement strategy, those were all items that we need to look at for that phase 3 development.
All right, so what, in a nutshell, what I think you're saying is that we don't need to refer it to you to do that business plan because that's what you're doing anyway.
That's what we're planning on doing. There is no approval for any project. Well, there's no approval yet at all. The point is to go forward with the business development that would get you to a project that we would have a better understanding on Skytrain, as well as what the costs, what we can do for $3.5 billion on the 27 kilometers, bring that to you, and then go forward.
Okay, on that basis, I'm satisfied on that. But the second, I would like to make a further motion. With all respect, I believe we've learned from past experience that negotiations of obligations that are preconditions and setting them for the future, sometimes it doesn't work out just the way we expect. And this issue of the $56 million, I think, is a critical one, and I'm calling on Surrey to pay it. And so what I am proposing by way of an amendment is that we add in right at the very beginning, subject to Surrey's specific agreement to pay no later than upon signing the MOU, which has been referred to, the sum of $56 million in work plan costs expended to date. And I would so move.
Okay, so that is an amendment to the motion there. Is there a seconder to the amendment? Okay, it's been seconded. Is there any discussion on the amendment? We are going to move to a discussion about the amendment now.
If I could just...
And Mayor Brody, you can motivate.
I just think that it's very important that we have a very clear understanding with Surrey that we expect them to pay the costs that are wasted. The plan was fully funded. The plan is fully approved. Surrey was a big part of that. Everything was in place. Work has begun. It's not just a matter that a bit of analysis has been done to this point. It's a matter that we've actually gone into the design phase. So it's a very significant cost. And if Surrey is now has a better idea, as they claim, then I think that they need to pay the costs that are thrown away.
Okay, thank you. Mayor McCallum.
Just in a comment, I think staff was very clear, and I'll say from our staff has been very clear, that there is a number of factors to solve this problem that we have to work through between TransLink and Surrey. And there's many options to come up to, and I think that's embedded in the plan as far as negotiations going forward. That is the recommendation of TransLink staff. And that final figure, what I do not agree with, I do not agree with the amendment putting a set figure in, because I think there has to be room in there, as per all past rapid transit projects that have been done in this region, is to work with the cities on some of the problems that come up like this. And that is a far better way to do it than to have a motion from this board on a set figure. That will not work, because when other rapid transit lines and buses, and which your cities are going to want in the future, do you want this board telling your city that if you change a bus route, your city, from what TransLink wants, that your city decides, okay, I want it off on this street? Do you want this board to say, then you have to pay this much because your city is not going with this TransLink board? I mean, this can go on and on. This is the type of amendment that divides this Metro board. And I would hope everyone around there, and I know you're new, but we need to work together in these things. You know, we can't have these kind of motions, or in this case, amendments. So certainly, if the mover of that amendment knows full well of the negotiations that we had to do in the past with different cities on changes in the rapid transit line. So I am completely against this one, and if the mover wants to continue to have his motion or amendment stand on the floor, then on the vote I will call for, and I don't like to do this because it shows division around this board, but unless he takes it off the floor, I will call for a recorded weighted vote.
Okay, Mayor Froese.
Thank you. So now we're into a pretty good discussion, and I want to know, from the body and from Mayor McCallum and Mayor Brody, if the amount of $56.6 million, I don't think it said 0.6, is firm and solid, because what I understand from the report from staff is that at one point it was $77 million. They've done some work, and now it's $56.6 million, and it may change up or down. I don't know. So, and I don't know if Mayor McCallum would be agreeable to this, because it is embedded in the whole motion and in the report that there would be an MOU, and as I understand from the amendment, is Mayor Brody wants that MOU won't be signed until this is dealt with. And I would think that in any discussion or negotiation that both parties aren't going to sign it unless both parties are willing. So maybe an amendment, or if Mayor Brody would be agreeable, that changing the 56 million to something like a figure agreeable or an amount agreeable to both City of Surrey and the TransLink Mayors Council is something that would work, because I think we're going down that path anyway, to look at something that will work between the two bodies, and putting a set number on it and saying it has to be a cash check. I mean, we can play those games too. They can write a check, and then TransLink has to write a check back to buy the rights of ways, or we come up to an agreement. But I'm thinking that the intent is that we don't forget about it, that we recognize it, and that maybe there's a way of doing it that'll satisfy both parties. But obviously it's not going to get signed unless both agree. So I'll leave it to Mayor Brody and Mayor McCallum.
So we do have a speaking list that I am going to stick to, but Mayor Stewart, Richard Stewart.
Actually would have thought Surrey would have been more comfortable with a set figure, but I'm absolutely fine with the idea that, and I accept Surrey Mayor McCallum's commitment that he expected to pay these costs. So if he's committing in principle that Surrey will cover the sunk costs, the wasted dollars incurred already on LRT, then I would be fine with that commitment moving forward.
Okay, so my question to the mover of the motion, because my concern with the motion is I think it is too specific at this particular point in time, having a specific dollar amount, that I think further analysis in terms of exactly what's involved in those costs does need to be involved. I also do think that we want to leave ourselves open to flexibility in terms of how that value can be reimbursed to the region. It might not necessarily be a payment, it might be land, it might be other benefits that the City of Surrey is able to provide there. And I'm wondering if there can be, if you would be open to providing a bit more flexibility into that amendment that might be able to bring better consensus around the group. Mayor Brody?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I don't see any magic in the $56 million figure, except that we have it in front of us. So I could live with the rest of my motion, instead of saying paying the sum of $56 million, simply saying no later than on the signing of the MOU, all work plan costs wasted to date.
Spent to date would probably be a better...
Sorry?
Spent to date might be a...
No, but no, just hang on. I'm not trying to be derogatory or pejorative by saying wasted. There will be those, some of those costs can be used. So it's not wasted.
So
unnecessarily expended. How's that?
That's very good. So, Mike Buda, I want to make sure we are, because I am going to accept that amendment, and I think that brings us closer to something we can work with. But, Mike Buda, can you clarify the amendment from your understanding at this point in time?
Sure. To amend the main motion to add in the following. So I guess it would be a new number 1. So yeah, so number 1 would be subject to Surrey's specific agreement no later than upon signing the MOU, all work plan costs unnecessarily expended to date. Yeah, sure, that's it, yes. So subject to Surrey's specific agreement to pay no later than upon signing the MOU, all work plan costs unnecessarily expended to date.
Okay, so I'm gonna go around the table for further comments in terms of that, but we will try and get that on writing so people can actually read. Mayor Belinkie.
I'd like to propose just a simpler way to look at this. We were all comfortable with the initial investment to do all the planning work. So that wasn't wasted money. If we were to look at 100% of the costs incurred to modify any of the pre-approved work, we don't have to look back and argue over every line item. Surrey can be responsible for 100% of the change fees associated with any changes they want to make going forward. But our investment was made with the best of intent. So we just don't want to have that money be wasted. It won't be wasted if everything's managed by Surrey going forward. And it's a much easier accounting practice as well.
Okay, well, I think with the motion we can start to dig a little bit deeper into that comment, and no doubt, regardless of what direction, there will be further reporting that I think will put us in a better position to speak to this. So, Mayor McCallum, did you want to, or sorry, Mayor Stewart? Sorry.
I was just wondering if we could have these things in writing that we can all see, because I find it really hard to make decisions when things are changing on the fly. And okay, but the other problem is when we're amending, and I mean, I would like it if it was following more proper procedure in terms of amending and sub-amendments, because that would help us kind of get our mind around it, so we don't walk out of this meeting having voted on something that we didn't fully understand.
Yeah, so as per my previous comment, I do want to make sure everyone understands exactly what we are voting for, and are we able to get something in writing on?
We can. It'll add a few minutes. We'll have to go and add it to that. But your comment, Mayor, is noted. We haven't done that in the past, but we can easily arrange for that capability to be added.
So at this point, I think, just to allow this meeting to move forward, I know we have it written. Can we have it read out to everyone so everyone knows what the amendment is? I think that's how we can move this meeting forward.
Yeah, I think we've got it.
I'm going to email it to you, though, right?
No, do you want to read it? Yeah, go back to it.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah, in a sec.
Okay, so it currently reads that the Mayor's Council on Regional Transportation, number 1, subject to the City of Surrey's specific agreement to pay no later than upon signing the MOU, all work plan costs unnecessarily expended to date. And number 2, endorse the work plan in this report that will have TransLink A proceed immediately with planning and project development work for a Skytrain on Fraser Highway.
I think, no, we're just dealing with the amendment right now. So, Mayor Brody.
Subject to that stuff that the Mayor's Council, 1, endorse, number 2, endorse, number 3, proceed. It's right at the beginning.
Okay. So that is the amendment. Is everyone clear what the amendment is? And we will work in future meetings to be able to put things up on screen there. But I think we are comfortable and know what we are voting for the amendment. Mayor McCallum.
Can I just ask one question? Because I've gone through these negotiations in the past, the word pay is I just want clarification on it. Because in the past when we've been TransLink's been dealing with cities and so forth, it is often trading of land and so forth. I want to be absolutely clear in this amendment that pay doesn't mean cash. It could mean any other things.
So looking at Mayor Brody, I think his intent is to keep that flexibility open. Is that correct?
Pay in kind or cash.
Compensate.
Compensation.
Compensate's better than
okay.
pay, in my opinion.
I'm quite confident we're breaking every rules and procedures right now, but we are going to go with the word compensate. So I think we're all clear in terms of the motion. With that, is everyone ready to be able to consider the amendment? Okay.
We have fantastic staff. The guy with the beard can type fast. Can you read that? All right.
Okay, so we are only voting on the top portion there, which is the amendment, which would add it in that location in, here we go. Okay, so it is on the top there. I'm not getting any signals from anyone in terms of not understanding, so I am going to call the vote at this point in time. All those in favor? Opposed? It carries unanimously. Now we're back to the original motion. Is there any further? As amended. Okay, I'm now going to go to Mayor Little.
And I'm about to hand it off to staff. So, well, let me read it out first as I'm handing it out to staff. So then, what I'd be moving is that this entire now newly amended motion be referred back to staff, and that staff be directed to identify alternate sources of revenue other than the regional taxation to address the difference in cost of approximately $1 billion between the previously supported LRT SNG Phase 1 project and the proposed Skytrain route along the Fraser Highway to Langley. And 1B, report back to the Mayor's Council prior to commencing, returning this item back to staff.
Okay, so I'm going to rule that, that referral would actually be better placed in actually voting down this motion and putting a subsequent motion forward. So I think that would be the more appropriate way. If you felt that more process was needed before we were able to take this direction, I believe this body should vote down this motion, and then that would be a subsequent motion that could be put forward. So that would be my position on that. Mayor Froese?
Yeah, just to hopefully, I think the intent, again, is to address the funding required to complete the 10-year vision. And I think we all want to see how that's going to go. But that's a lot of work. That's going to take Mr. Buda's great expertise in lobbying the federal and provincial government during the next election to get some commitments. And I want to remind everyone here that the mayor's vision was passed without any funding in place. We struggled to find funding for the mayor's vision. The fact is, we went through a referendum or a plebiscite, which failed, and it took time to get that funding. But I agree that it's important that we don't lose sight of the fact that we need funding to complete the 10-year vision. So I'm wondering if the mover would consider this as not sure, but an amendment that, and it could be point 3 before we receive a report, that work continue on securing funding for completing the mayor's vision. And that's really, I think, what your intent is. But to do that, we still need to proceed on this, on as we've discussed, the Phase 2 funding, which is already in place. But we do need to get that Phase 3 funding. So I just want to throw that out to the mover, if he considers something like that, if that helps the body.
So just to jump in there, I think a lot of the work that Mayor Little has suggested is embedded in the work plan that would be happening here. I think the challenge with what we're actually debating is whether that work can be done concurrently with all the other work outlined, or that work has to be done before any of this other work can start. And ultimately, that's what is being considered, and that's why I don't, I would say the appropriate measure would be to actually turn this down at this point and move forward with that. But I do want to reassure everyone, the work that Mayor Little is suggesting is embedded, and that work will come through this process here. So I'm going to continue to get back to discussion about the motion that is on the table. Mayor McEwen.
I don't see the relation with what Mayor Little is asking. Mayor Little is asking, we're looking at a Phase 2, a concept that we were moving forward, that is, the scope has dramatically changed. We know there's going to be additional cost to that scope. All we're asking for is why move forward if the funding isn't there to change the scope?
Okay, Mike Buda, do you have?
So the work plan's asking staff, the recommendation's asking staff to start working on a business case for a project, some of that work will be actually part of essentially the Phase 2 plan funding envelope. Some of it is going to inform the debate around how much we're going to need for Phase 3, what will be in Phase 3, how quickly will we need to roll out Phase 3 funding, what will it do. This is very similar, in fact, to what we did in the Phase 1 plan, where we weren't approving funding, we weren't approving projects for Broadway or Surrey. but we actually approved, we essentially told staff to go ahead and start doing project development. So the motion is definitely not approving Skytrain all the way to Langley. It's asking staff to come to develop the business case, the design work, the consultations, the new cost estimates, to bring all that stuff back. It's going to inform the Phase 3 debate, but it will also allow us to move ahead with the Phase 2 plan funding that's already approved.
Just as a follow-up, but we know that it's going to be additional costs. And so I question why we would spend all this staff resource time doing this when we know we don't have the funding.
So the work that staff will do, in part, is going to identify how much Skytrain we can build along Fraser for $1.6 billion. They will ensure, well, part of their job is to ensure that they come back with a project that's a good transit project that will be valuable for the region, and that is a good use of funding. And they will have to assume, as part of that, that wherever that line ends after $1.6 billion, that's a good standalone project. We'll also, of course, as part of the Phase 3 plan, hope that we can continue the line forward. It's actually not that dissimilar to the Broadway subway project. It was originally envisioned in the vision. Actually, it is envisioned in the vision as a commercial drive to UBC line. We've decided through the vision to build it in 2 stages. The project was planned to Arbutus because that was a good project on its own, even if nothing else happens in that project, and that's not the wish or desire of anybody here. But if nothing else were to happen in that corridor, that would be a good project. The same thing is going to happen here. They'll bring back a good project for $1.6 billion. They'll also bring back recommendations on how we could go forward if the funding materializes from this body.
So as I've mentioned before, in terms of the budget allocation, both for Phase 2 and contemplated in Phase 3, has not changed. That remains the same. There is no doubt the decisions that we are making does have an impact in terms of the scope and potential technology for future phases. So I don't want to dismiss, because that does have an implication there. But what we are not asking, in the path we're not going for, is actually to change any of those budget allocations by moving forward with this year. And I'm getting that concern around here, but I think we need to be clear. We're still working within the same budget envelopes that we always have. We're obviously working at amending the project. So I'm going to go back to speakers on the motion on the table. I saw a few hands to the right, but Mayor Richard Stewart.
Point of order. So there was an amendment was proposed by Mayor Little, but you've ruled that amendment out of order, as far as I
That's
understand.
correct, yes.
Okay, so now we're back to discussing.
We are on the motion on the
as
screen.
amended by Mayor Brody.
That's correct. So we've got Mayor Richard Stewart, Councillor Cameron. So Mayor Richard Stewart first.
And I wasn't going to take issue, but I will. I'm not sure this has completely changed the budget in the same way that if my Parks Department was approved for building a football field out of grass, and they decided to build half of one out of artificial turf on the grounds that we stayed within the budget envelope, they would be fired, and because we didn't approve that. And our challenge now is that I'm not sure the standalone project halfway to Langley is a standalone valid project. And so my challenge is actually in the wording project development. I think too many of our residents might well perceive that to be that we're developing the project rather than evaluating or designing. So that is my only discomfort here, is that we ought to be proceeding immediately now to figure out whether it's a good idea to go Skytrain out to Langley. And that's not what the sentence words say, and I suspect it's not what half the headlines tomorrow morning will say.
So maybe I can get staff to respond to that, but also comment about, I guess, the future decision points, because this obviously is a major decision point along this process, but there are future reports and future decision reports that have been outlined, and I want to make sure this body is clear what those would be and what that would look like if we chose to go down this path.
So I take, thank you, Chair. So I take Mayor Stewart's points to heart. It does seem all-encompassing, but the point is that all of these starred points in a project development, we would be coming back to the board and the mayors for direction to continue to proceed. So we would be going through the initial project development, understanding now what the alignment would be, what else we can do on the other corridors, for that $3.5 billion, including getting to a point for that initial business case on how much could be built for $1.6 billion, and is that playing field worth playing? And then you can tell us whether or not we want to continue going forward. But our work plan is designed to keep us moving, but there are interim check-ins to make sure we're on the right path.
Oh, I know. I'm just, you're explaining to me what you mean by project development, and I know what you mean by project development. I just worry that 2.6 million people in the region don't know what you mean by that. So pretty sure they don't.
So we can amend the language if it looks better to, as opposed to full project development, to proceed with the planning process of this, if that planning and design, and not get to the full development if that seems clear.
So I will look to Mayor Stewart. Are you looking to make an amendment? It's not a significant amendment to the wording, but it could change some of the intent. And if you would like to propose that, I can definitely entertain that.
We adopt the language proposed by staff.
Okay, so there has been an amendment. Staff, can you say the wording that is being proposed here as an amendment? I will look to see if there's a seconder, if there's an interest in pursuing this amendment. If there is a seconder. So let's...
As I understand it, Chair, then it would be what is shown as 1A, so proceed immediately with planning and design work for a Skytrain on Fraser Highway project, as opposed to planning and project development work.
That's not what you said last time.
Okay, so what's up on the screen is is there any way we can highlight what the amendment is there, just so that everyone is clear what we are now voting on? Okay, these are, in red is the new wording that is suggested for 1A. Mayor Stewart, do you have any further motivation on this amendment? Or you're comfortable? Yes. Okay, so this amendment has been moved and seconded. Mayor McCallum.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with it. This is, I've been on this board in the past for 11 years. This is the first time I've ever heard staff make an amendment to a motion that's on the floor. That really disturbs me, first of all, even the procedure that happened here. But second of all, it changes the whole scope of what the whole work plan as far as that, because now we're breaking it down into pieces, and again, it's going to be a delay tactic for this project, and so from the City of Surrey's point of view, we will not accept this as an amendment, and I will at this time, because I have to do it before you even call the vote, or if you let me speak again before you call the vote, I will call for a recorded, weighted vote on this amendment.
Thank you. So my impression on this one here is it doesn't really change the intent or the work that staff would be doing, but I think it does address some of the concerns around this table in terms of the process that we are going to be going forward with. Mayor Froese.
Well, I don't want to see defeat snatched from the jaws of victory on this one. As Mayor Cote had said, this doesn't change what we're doing here, and I would hate to see this go down because, Mayor McCallum, if you're going to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory if you vote against this, it's there. It's the same thing. And it's not going to delay it at all. And so I think we have a body here that's willing to work with Surrey, and I'd hate to see this go down.
Okay, so we are still discussing the amendment. Councillor Cameron.
I think the reason we're all struggling with this so much is because we're doing this process in the reverse order that it's normally done. My understanding is when the Mayor's Council has previously investigated these projects, they've looked at the region's needs and they have opened the analysis up, and they've looked at all the different alternatives and come up with the recommended choice. What we have here is a reverse engineered process where we have a predetermined end result, and now we're going back to see if it works. And that's why this is such a problem, because when Mr. Buddha says, you know, we're going to assume that this is a standalone project and that will stay within the Phase 2 funding envelope, I agree entirely with Mayor Stewart's comment. This is like building half a soccer field. I didn't get a chance to ask Mr. Cross this question, but I believe he'd say, I don't think he could say, based on work done to date, that a Skytrain to Fleetwood would be a viable or worthwhile project for the region, or that it would be the best use of the region's funds. And yet here we are, we're staying within the 1.6 funding envelope, and that means, to the best of our knowledge, we're only getting to Fleetwood. So why are we spending time investigating what we pretty much know is not going to be a viable project? And so it's a problem. I mean, the Vancouver Broadway line is a different example, because you can build a Broadway line to Arbutus and it works. You know, Mayor Stewart will say it works better to UBC, but it's still going to work, half of it. Half of the Skytrain to Langley is not going to work at all. And us spending further staff time researching a project we know is not going to be viable, at least in half. One can argue that going all the way to Langley may well be worthwhile, but why are we spending time researching half a project? So I don't. The problem here is we're starting with Surrey dictating exactly what the end result of our work's going to be, and then now we're doing the work to substantiate or make that decision. What we really should be doing is canceling the LRT and then taking Surrey's views into account, but looking at what the best options were and something that works for Surrey and for the region. But that's not what's happening. So that's what I see as a problem here, and what Mayor Stewart's amendment here is trying to do is trying to say, let's dial this back a bit and see what is good planning before we start committing to the end result. So I'm going to support his amendment. I expect it will go down in the weighted vote. But the bigger problem here is that we're not following the proper procedure when we're to spend billions of dollars in federal in taxpayers' money on a regional project. We're going down one path. The path is predetermined, and we're trying to play catch up and build a case for that path. And that's, in my view, that's not an appropriate way to do this.
Okay, well, thank you for the comments, and I agree some of the challenges we are facing around this discussion is that the process is not the typical process to land at this point here. I will say, though, that making statements that it's not a viable project is premature at this particular point, and I think it also needs to be acknowledged that a lot of previous work has been done on the Fraser corridor to analyze the transit demand there. So this is not a project that has landed out of nowhere. There has been past work on it, but I will acknowledge, in terms of the process, in terms of the decisions we're making here, are not the full process that we would normally be looking at. So we are looking at changes there, and I will acknowledge that. So with that, I'm going to call the question on the amendment, which I'll be perfectly upfront. I actually don't think dramatically changes the work plan and how staff would proceed moving forward. But in my opinion, I think does provide a bit of extra comfort around this body, and I would myself also be supporting the amendment as well. So with that, I will be calling the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Oh, I apologize. A weighted vote. Doug McCallan has called a weighted vote on this one. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we've got 4 opposed. So, okay, 5. Okay, so the amendment has been defeated. We are back to the original motion, which can we ask that we get the original motion back on the screen? So we had 5 members opposed from Vancouver, Surrey, Delta, the City of Langley, and Tsawwassen First Nation opposed the motion. I've been advised by a weighted vote that means that the motion has been defeated, but we are going to get clarification on that. So it's close. It's a tie.
So that means that the motion is defeated.
Just. Is it?
So I believe that means the motion is defeated. We're just checking.
Okay, so we are going to check, but a tie most likely means the motion is defeated. And I appreciate everyone.
Yes.
Okay, so the ruling is a tie vote in this here. It does mean that the motion is defeated. We are now back to the original motion on the table. Okay, so we're just going to put it up on the screen so everyone is crystal clear on the motion that is now on the table, which is the original amended motion there. Mayor McCallum.
Just on this one too, Mr. Chair, and I really do feel bad doing this, but I'm going to also call for a weighted vote on this one.
Okay, so a weighted vote has been called on this one here. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table? If not, I am going to call the question. All those in favor?
Sorry.
I apologize, Mayor Little.
Well, I still don't think this adequately addresses the issue of the $1 billion. I understand that it more adequately addresses the issue of the $56 million potentially that's not being compensated for. But to potentially create a project that would extend partway to Fleetwood, it just makes no sense in my mind. Even the Fraser Highway extension at this point, there's so much park and ALR land, no opportunity to actually develop the lands around the Skytrain stations without destroying the ALR agreements throughout that corridor. You're going to have to drop stations down in the middle of Farmer Bob's field and hope that people are going to commute from the region to that area to be able to get on this. I don't see this as having a potential business case for that area. I would much rather focus on projects that are genuinely viable, and so I'm not going to be supporting this motion as presented.
Okay, thank you. And I think to your earlier point, there has been concerns around this table in terms of some process that potentially should precede this decision point here. And my recommendation, if that is your intent, the correct procedure would be to vote against this motion and then supply a motion similar to what Mayor Little had proposed in terms of work that would take us to being able to consider that. But at the time being, this is the motion that we are considering on the table here. Director LeBlanc.
Could I request that the 1A and 1B be split and voted on separately?
Yes, so we can actually split 1A and 1B. The request is...
So we'll do 1A, B, and then 2. There'll be 3 separate votes.
Okay, so we're going to do 3 separate votes for 1A, 1B, and number 2. With that, I'm going to call the question on 1A. All those... And these will all be weighted votes, just so everyone is clear. All those in favor of 1A? Okay. Just make sure you're raising your... Keep your hands up. We just want to make sure. I believe it passes. Oh, right. All those opposed? Okay. So I believe it has passed, but I do want to get confirmation. Okay, so that has passed. We're now going to move to a vote on 1B. All those in favor? Opposed? And that has passed as well. We're going to now move to item number 2. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. And I actually think we need to go back to the first motion. I apologize. I kind of skipped to one. The amendment there, which should have been separated. I apologize. I didn't see that. We're going to vote on that as well. All those in favor? Sorry. The amendment that we had made that we put at the top. When I skipped to 1A, I apologize. I missed that. Now, that amendment received unanimous support, so I'm hoping we can get there. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Well, that completes our work on that particular item. I know this is going to be a difficult work item for this group, and I think we want to make sure that we are dealing with all of the issues and concerns from around this table. So we are going to adjourn this meeting, but before we did, Okay, I do want to acknowledge the TransLink board chair, Lorraine Cunningham. She is now completing her service. She has served many years on the TransLink board, and in my opinion has done an amazing job being able to get it to this point. So before I conclude our open meeting today, I did want to acknowledge the work she has done towards moving forward the TransLink Corporation. So thank you, Lorraine. A much more positive way to end on. So with that, we'll call for an adjournment of our open meeting. Second, all those in favor?